Hello, and welcome to this slideshow. This is the third in a series where I, Bones, tell Jake, a dinosaur, about what Magic was like in the past, when I had just started playing and was getting deeper into the game. This time I'm going to talk through the 4 sets that released in 2008 and what playing casual Magic was like broadly at that time. Hello, Jake. What were you doing this year instead of playing Magic?
Well, Bones, I am much more prepared to answer this question than I was for our last episode. So, in 2008, the series finale of Avatar The Last Airbender came out, which was a very big deal to me. Phenomenal show.
Mm-hmm.
I was playing some Call of Duty World at War. Certainly at this time, I had gotten an Xbox finally and was very excited to join all my friends who've been playing Call of Duty since the fourth one came out.
Mm-hmm.
Although I was pretty bummed that most of them went back to the fourth one, which I didn't own after getting the fifth one, but that's how teenagers can be.
Mm-hmm.
And reading wise, I was reading Lord of the Rings at this point for the first time in my life.
Oh, excellent.
So, outside of Call of Duty, a lot of formative pieces of media that I still really like to this day.
Mm-hmm. I also played both Call of Duties, but I really enjoyed World at War because of the Nazi zombies.
I am a big Nazi Zombies fan. It is a really, really fun game mode. I think the fact that it was just sort of jammed in there when you finish the campaign was
Mm-hmm.
also really, really cool. Games don't really do that anymore. I was talking to my friends the other day about how Pokemon Gold and Silver just had the whole basically first game
Mm-hmm.
stuck on the end of the
Oh, yeah.
cartridge. And that was incredible and obviously would have been way less surprising in the internet age. But I think zombie mode still sort of struck that, wow, I had no idea this was here. The internet and YouTube were not prolific enough for me to have been spoiled. I just beat the campaign and all of a sudden we were playing this really cool mode.
It's aged super well. I loved it a lot. It's going to be very important next year to my story that I will get into next year. Yeah, sneak peek.
Absolutely. When we get to whenever Black Ops came out, I will have a very fun story to share with you as well.
Awesome. So, okay, that's what Jake was doing. Here's what I was doing. It was my junior to senior year of high school. I turned 17. I started working my first job ever at a local gas station called the Goldsby Store, which is the town that I grew up in, Goldsby. I was watching movies like Iron Man, it's first in the MCU, which would be very important to me for the next like 15 years. I watched The Dark Knight, incredible film that's only gotten better with age. I'm gonna guess that you watched both of those as well.
I did watch both of those. In my research, did catch that Iron Man came out this year. I'm much less into the MCU than you are, but Iron Man was a really great movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think still holds up in a lot of respects. I don't love a lot of the other stuff in that space. I really like it. And yeah, The Dark Knight is excellent.
And then in the vein of video games that we were playing, my preferred shooter was Counter-Strike. And I don't know that it was 2008 specifically, but I got Counter-Strike at some point in this year or the years before it. And I was playing a lot on Steam. On Counter-Strike, you can change your username as often as you want. And I would change it very often because I had nothing like specific that I felt embodied by. And one time I was the most successful on the team that game because of something that I took from someone else. So I was a lucky looter. And then I just kept using that name. And then whenever I would have a bad run, I would change my name to Unlucky Looter and I would just vacillate between the two. And Lucky Looter
Wow.
is what I ended up using as my username for Xbox Live whenever I got that. And then it just stuck from there. So that's where my username originates.
It's really funny you say that because my first username also originated via Xbox Live, or at least the first one that stuck for a chunk of time, but it wasn't Deinonychus at that time. That will be 2013 where
Okay.
that comes about. Spoilers for the future.
Yeah. No, we're just teasing the later episodes in the series. Other video games that I was playing were Mario Kart Wii, Super Smash Bros. Wii. You mentioned every time so far that you've been an early adopter of the Wii, so I'm sure you were playing those as well.
I was definitely playing both of those.
And this is the year that my favorite video game of all time releases, which I know you've played as well, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2 for the DS.
Yes, I have played that game. I quite like it. Your memory of it is much better than mine.
Well, I've played it
But
all the way through like 3 or 4 times over the years.
Yeah, that checks out. Whereas I think I played it the one time.
Yeah, the one time in 2008. Haven't refreshed your
Yeah.
memory. All right, cool. And so those were the games and the media that we were engaging with, but I was getting further into Magic where you were not. So, as is tradition, what I'm about to do is reveal to you the first set of cards, which are the cards that are very popular that pro players are playing in Standard. But, as we mentioned offline, there are 3 cards in the Bodleian Cube from this year in the sets that come out this year. Before I tell you those sets, can you name the 2 that are not on the screen right now?
Yeah, so I have been thinking about this since we had that discussion because I wanted to give a good attempt. Obviously, I haven't looked it up. So I know right after Lorwyn, we have Morningtide and Shadowmoor, which of course brings Bitter Blossom. I was really struggling to figure out what comes next, but I think we're going to New Phyrexia, which means that Dismember and Phyrexian Metamorph are the
No,
other 2 cards.
we're not even close to New Phyrexia.
Oh, shoot. Well, if that's the case, are we going to Zendikar?
No.
Then I have no guesses.
Oh,
Man,
okay.
I really thought I was prepared for this one.
That's really funny. Okay, I think you know this, but I'm going to tell you as if you don't. Lorwyn Morningtide is part of a mega
Yep.
block. It's 2 mini blocks. Lorwyn Morningtide, then Shadowmoor Eventide. 4th set.
Ah,
Did you know that?
I've definitely heard the name Eventide before, but I thought there were only 3 Lorwyn sets.
The set that comes out after Eventide is not the set that the other cards are from. The cards that are in Bodleian are from this set, Morningtide, a second card, and Eventide. You want a hint?
I mean, I think I've taken sufficient guesses. I'm giving myself
All right.
no credit for. Oh, Flickerisp is one of them.
Yep. And the final one is also a 3/1 flyer for 3.
Oh, it's Vendilion Click.
Yep, sure is.
Like I said, I am not giving myself credit for those ones because like I said, I prepared. I looked
Yeah,
over
you
the
thought it
list of the
was New
cube
Phyrexia.
and was sitting there so convinced. Well, you said 3 cards,
That's really
and I
funny.
felt like we were pretty close to that. And I was like, well, Dismember Phyrexian Metamorph. That's 2
Well,
cards.
you know, I mean, I
Well,
commend your confidence, but okay. All right. Moving next. The top standard cards from 2008 were all from Morningtide and Shadowmoor, which makes sense because even though we do get a 4th set this year, which is very impactful, because it comes out in the fall, it doesn't have a lot of time to impact the data before we move into 2009. So that will make more sense as we get further in, but the early 2 sets of the year, Morningtide, then Shadowmoor, makes a lot more sense. So how do you feel about these 4 cards? I know you love Bitter Blossom.
well, right.
Not as much as me, but you do love it.
I do love Bitter Blossom. It is one of only 3 cards in Bodleian Cube that has a basic land signed wishing it farewell. Because the very first time I tested it, the cube was much more Masters limited, and it was just so unreasonable that I cut it immediately. And so my drafter signed the basic Bye Bye Bitter Blossom
That's great.
as the deck name.
By some metrics, it is my favorite card. So
Wow.
that's why I say that you don't love it as much as me.
This might be one of the cards we feel most similarly about. I don't think it's truly one of my favorites, but it's got to be up there. I do love one other card on this slide,
I'm going to guess
and 2 of
it's
them I've never seen before.
Kitchen Finks.
Yeah.
Because you like persist combos.
What's funny, I really don't.
Well, okay, you've brought them up a couple of times, so I know you think about them.
Right. I ran persist combo at one point, pulled it off exactly one time, and just didn't think it was cool. So I cut it. But all of my drafters really like sort of janky kitchen thinks dreams of persist combos. Not like a real persist combo deck, just using cards like Luminarch Aspirant to put counters on it so that it continues to die and gain life and do things like that. So the drafters love Finks, but more fair Finks. The persist combo was too much for the group's taste.
So you said Finks, but no Finks.
Yes. And then these other 2 are cool, but I've never seen it before. Chameleon Colossus. Well, Pro Black isn't cool. Otherwise,
that's going to hurt your feelings a little.
It is, but on-rate changelings are cool. And Demigod of Revenge. I love this art.
Yeah, you probably like
It
the
is
colors too.
5 mana, 5/4 flying haste. When you play it, whoa. Well, that's pretty cool. Crazy pip intensive, of course, but
Hmm.
how could you not like that?
There used to be a gotcha with this card at PPTQs, where if you announce that you cast Demigod Revenge, and the opponent says counterspell or mana leak or whatever, you go okay. You move it in your graveyard and you go trigger resolves.
Wow.
So blue opponents would have to be like Demigod trigger resolves before they go to countering. But that's kind of angle shooting. It's just something that was like uniquely relevant to the time that it's just not a thing anyone's ever going to think of anymore.
That's crazy. Right? I would think you would make the assumption that you're putting the counterspell at the time that makes sense to
Yeah,
do it.
but when we're talking about PPTQs, angles will be shot. All right, so these are what the good players are playing, and here's what I was doing. So just like before, I'm going to FNM and learning. These two cards on the left are on the screen because I received them, which means I believe Morningtide was the first pre-release that I attended.
That's very cool.
Right, love that it's date stamped. That's kind of a cool little bit of nostalgia to like. I literally know what I was doing January 19th, 2008 because
I truly miss the dates in the date stamp. It
yeah.
is so much cooler than just this is a thing I opened in 2025.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure how to feel about it because I can't think about it objectively. I have so much nostalgia for what I'm talking about right now. But I get the feeling that would be more popular. But I mean, they obviously have some data that has pushed them in this direction.
Desire not to spend money on stamps for every set.
Yeah, that's fair. The other card on the screen here, a Johnny Goldmane, is here because I was learning about the game in ways that I misunderstood it. So I'm going to FNMs, playing standard, doing poorly. One of my opponents plays Bitter Blossom and then plays a Johnny Goldmane. And they minus a Johnny to put a plus counter on all their fairies, and they get vigilance, and they hit me. And then they minus a Johnny again. And then they minus Johnny a third time, the third turn in a row. I said to them out loud, like, wow, you are never going to get to the ult if you just minus it like that. And they just looked at me dumbfounded and were like, that is so irrelevant to this card. That means nothing. It basically doesn't even exist. And it just blew my mind that you would not try to get to the ultimate effect of a planeswalker. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important lesson that everyone learns at some point in Magic. I
Mm-hmm.
love this Ajani. It's a very, very cool card.
It is super cool. I wish the plus
I've,
was a little bit more relevant to games, but
yeah,
it's really good at buying you 2 more turns of Bitter Blossom.
it is really good at that. And the minus being a -1, I do think helps it in some regard.
Mm-hmm.
Though I suppose it could be argued that it's mostly gonna -1 4 times in the average game.
Yeah,
But
probably true.
I still think it's very cool.
Yeah, unless you have to Wrath or something, and then you're plussing just to set yourself up for another minus in the future.
That's true. Or making a big white avatar creature token
Which
and then buffing it.
Yeah, I was convinced was the most important part of this card, was attempting to make a Sarah avatar token. Okay, so this brings us to Morningtide. So let's talk about Morningtide. I was previously asking you, what do you know about this set, each and every set? I think instead I'm just going to ask you specific questions because you aren't going to know very much about these sets until we get a bit more recent. So
I think that's fair.
on screen here, we have some theme decks. One of them is missing. One of the themes of the set did not get a deck supporting it. So we have Going Rogue, Warrior's Code, Shamanism, Battalion. What would be the fifth deck if they were to give it support?
Fairies.
Nope. Rogue, Warrior, Shaman, Soldier,
I don't know.
Wizard.
Type. Oh.
Lorwyn is all about the species, and Morningtide is all about the classes. There are 5 relevant classes, and they are Rogue, Warrior, Shaman, Wizard, and Soldier.
Very cool. Is that Stonehewer Giant?
Yes, it is. Yep. We're going to talk about him a little bit on an upcoming slide.
Okay.
The mechanics from this set are Kinship, Prowl, and Reinforce. Do you know any of those mechanics?
Prowl was on the the most recent slide. Couldn't tell you what it does. I've definitely heard of kinship, but I have no idea what it does. No, is the answer.
Okay. Kinship is on an upcoming slide. Prowl was on the last slide. Reinforce is also an upcoming slide, so I'll hit those whenever we hit them.
Reinforce put a counter on the creature you control at the lowest power.
Nope. You're thinking of a mechanic from Dragons of Tarkir, Bolster.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, that's not coming for a while. So yeah, let's go back here to Prowl. You may play this card for its Prowl cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a Goblin or Rogue. And that Goblin and Rogue there is in reminder text because what it means is if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with a creature that shares a creature type with this spell. So it's going to be on creatures. And so if you have a Fairy Rogue with it, you can hit with a Fairy Wizard or a Goblin Rogue, and it will work either way. And it's going to appear on instants and sorceries that are tribal. So it'll just be Rogue, and then if you deal combat damage with a rogue of any species, as long as you hit with a rogue, it shares a type with the tribal spell, and then you can get the discount.
Very cool. I like that.
It is cool. The thing that I dislike about it is that the two modes are wildly different, especially if they have a payoff trigger like Earwig Squad here. So you get a 5/3 with no abilities for 5, or you get a 5/3 for 3, which is already a great rate, and you get a trigger, which is the point of playing the card. So the floor is quite low and the ceiling is quite high, and there's very little middle ground. With the hoop being, did you deal damage to a player with the correct creature type? And that's like a, I don't know, an inordinate divide for the amount of work being done.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But I loved it at the
You
time.
got extra abilities for casting it with the Prowl cost.
Mm-hmm.
It does feel like if the Prowl cost gives you that, the 5 mana mode
Should also give you that. It should just be a discount.
I've lost to this card before.
Oh yeah.
I read the whole text, and one time my friends and I drafted a random fairy tale cube, not Maze Fay cube.
Mm-hmm.
One of them just found it and he drafted it, and I was playing this like crazy control deck because all the threats in the cube were terrible. So I was just jamming answers, and my friend decked me with this. He played it and it just took the only 3 cards left in my deck that could win the game, and then I had to concede because there's no way for me to win.
Yeah, that's exactly why I love this card. You get to go see what the opponent needs, and then you take it out. Yeah, I have a lot of good memories with this card. Okay, so, all right, those are the mechanics, Kinship, Prowl, Reinforce, as well as the mechanics from Lorwyn, because this is a continuation of Lorwyn. So, first up, just for Jake, we have Warren Weirding and Weirding Shaman, which are 2 similar cards. What do you think about those?
Wow. That is a weird Krenkos command.
Or Cruel Eater.
I like it. Yeah, it's modal, but in a pretty interesting way. And I like that it asks something of you. Really good in multiples, clearly.
Mm-hmm. I used to play this as a one-of in Legacy to answer things like Merit Lage, Emrakul, really in any big creatures.
That's awesome.
And I told you on the last year that I would play Wart Boggart Auntie, which lets you regrow a goblin every upkeep. And this counts because it's tribal goblin. And so I was able to get people into like a soft lock situation where I could edict them every single turn.
I love that. I like Weirding Shaman even more. The rate is so goofy on the ability, but really charming, and I love the art.
Yeah, I love that it's got a purple stripe down the middle, and then the thing that it is casting magic on is being split into like a 2 purple halves of the same goblin.
Yeah, that is very, very, very cool. Wow, Shard Volley is something.
What's a lightning bolt worth?
Yeah, Brett, put this in the Fire Swamp if you're listening. It's got strong Fire Swamp vibes to me.
Sure, I agree with that.
I think that's very cool.
Triggers Mayhem Devil.
It does trigger Mayhem Devil. I think in the world where you're playing Mayhem Devil, the chance that this is on the other side of the battlefield is pretty brutal.
Kills Mayhem Devil.
It does kill Mayhem Devil, but a land is a lot.
It is. That's true.
Though I would be excited to play a cube where this was a premium removal still. I don't know if that's a cube where like 100 flagstones of Trocaire or something like that, but it's really cool. I like it. Love the art too. I like the set symbol. I genuinely don't think I've ever seen it before.
I love the set symbol, and I obviously have a lot of nostalgia for the set. It's one of my favorites. Some of my favorite cards come from it. I have considered that my first Magic tattoo would be just the Morning Tide set symbol, because I think it is just a cool symbol and would have that added layer of meaning for me.
I like it.
And then Wolf Skull Shaman here. The elves on Lorwyn have just packs of wolves that they raise and hunt with. All of their arts with them like interacting with the wolves remind me of you.
I like that a lot. That's a cool card.
Yeah, it's in Maze Fake Cube, and I think it's quite cool there. There's kinship. That's what kinship does. At the end of your upkeep, look at your top card. If it shares a creature type with this card, you get some bonus. Triggers every upkeep.
Cool. A little bit time consuming as far as mechanics go, but I'm kind of a sucker for anything that causes you to look at the top card of your library and reveal it.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's just a really cinematic drama to that, which just works so well.
Yeah, it's cool.
Both players are, know what this 2/2 is going to do if it comes into play, and they know exactly what they want to happen, and they're just kind of in it together to see if it happens.
And also, Clashers in this set. So there were ways where you could kind of attempt to control the top card.
That makes sense too.
Scry was invented in 5th Dawn, but it has not become evergreen yet. Okay.
Gotcha. Plus, we can ponder into it.
Yeah, that's true. That was in Lorwyn.
In the Ponder Wolf Skull Shaman cube.
Perfect power level. Okay. Cool for cubes. Check out Indomitable Ancients.
Okay. You're going to really have to sell me that a 2/10 is cool ever.
Big numbers are cool. I don't know why do you need selling?
I think walls suck.
That's true. So the reason this was cool at the time is because you were playing a Tree Folk deck with Doran, and this was secretly a 10/10
right.
for 4.
Yeah. So that's cool. It at least is a 2/10, so it's able to eat creatures. It doesn't just sit there and result in no progress to the game board. But walls are one of those things that I have low tolerance for them. I think there are just more interesting ways in the game to play than having walls. But if Doran the Siege Tower is around, this is a cool card. Are there any flings that deal damage because of the toughness? That would be kind of fun too.
I don't think so. You would think there would be some 100 Ornithopters card like that. There's one that just came out in Dragonstone that does damage equal to the difference between the power and the toughness. But
well, that 8 damage right here. I like the huge amount of flavor text on this card. And
me too.
art.
Yeah,
so,
it has great flavor. That's for sure.
Okay, you've sort of sold me.
Okay, Stonehewer Giant. I think this is a cool thing in the Stoneforge Mystic space that's not quite as strong as Stoneforge.
I think that's really true. I think there are a lot of cubes where this is the right power you're looking for. I've actually considered this card for Midwinter, but I think it's insane with Colossus Hammer.
Yeah.
And so I don't actually want that.
Instant tutor out and attach Colossus Hammer is a little busted.
Just a little bit. And I love the janky Colossus Hammer, but I don't think this is janky. And I think you're going to survive to be able to untap with this. Maybe they kill it, right? But I think that the other ways I have to equip it don't search for it. And I think anytime you're shortcutting a sort of 3-piece, call it a combo in this case, I think it's fair to pay 2 mana to give a creature +10/+10 at instant speed is a combo. Anytime you're shortcutting 3 parts to 2 parts, I'm always very dubious.
Yeah.
In this case, one of those parts is just attaching it, but finding it and attaching it is a lot.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen Boulder Heavyweights before?
I've never seen this card.
Check it out.
So we have an 8/8 trample. It's a good start. Whoa. I mean, that's wild.
Choose your champion.
That's such a cool card.
Isn't it?
I love cards, especially in Limited, that ask you the question, is your deck the best at X? So in the same way, I think Goblin Guide asks you, are you the fastest deck at the table? Can you be? If you are, Goblin Guide is great. If you aren't, it's not very good. I like that this asks you, do you have the biggest thing in this matchup? I don't know if this is ever good. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not.
The
But that's
thing,
not what I'm here to judge. I think it's really cool.
the things that charm me about this card are that back in the day, there's a giant spell in Lorwyn called Crush Underfoot. A giant you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature. So you could have them get whatever their biggest best creature is straight into play, and then you just step on it with your 8/8, and
It's a precursor to Stomp.
you've killed their best creature for 2. They put it out, and you've killed it, and now you have an 8/8 trample for 4. The thing that I like about it
Yeah.
these days is I wonder if you could do almost like a stifle knot thing that's a little bit less aggressively costed,
Oh,
or even like at your end step.
Containment Priest is pretty sweet.
Yeah, Containment Priest, or at your end step, I'll flash in Dress Down. My turn, untap, upkeep, Boulder Heavyweights.
You know, Bones, I think you're onto something here. A cube in which you're trying to stifle knot, containment priest, etc. your boulder heavyweights in is awesome. That's such a cool idea.
And then Dreadnought just kills the opponent so fast, and it only costs 1. So I think that's like certainly the most efficient version. We're actually going to talk about it at the end of this year again. What an effective card Dreadnought was in Constructed, and it is beloved in a lot of cubes for a lot of reasons. But I think that there is a way that doesn't kill the opponent in 2 swings guaranteed like that.
I think you're right. Now I'm contemplating if boulder heavyweights is a midwinter card, and I can put a weird boldware stifle knot deck in the cube. I don't know, but I'm certainly going to think about it because I love that idea, and it sounds really unique, right? If someone did that, I would think that's so cool.
The problem is that you really shouldn't put it in any cubes with Flicker Wisp or Touch the Spirit Realm type effects, because if your opponent can blink it, it's such a blowout.
Yeah, I could be persuaded to cut Touch the Spirit Realm to enable such a cool deck.
Wow, I'm touched.
I mean, it's just really cool. I think that that's so beautifully janky that I'm at least tempted to think about it.
Awesome. Okay, and then Hunting Triad here is secretly a split card. 4 mana sorcery to make 3 elves, or 4 mana instant to put 3+ counters out.
And that is what Reinforce does.
Yep.
All right, that's aptly named. It's like Scavenge, but from your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Are there cards with Reinforce and Scavenge? That feels like a modern.
There was a Cruciak, Bannerhide Cruciak from Modern Horizons, has Reinforce and Scavenge. Modern Horizons 2.
Love Modern Horizons too. As long as the spell is cast for mana, I like it from that set.
Yeah. Good caveat. Okay. Next up, cube staples from this set. There's your Vendilion Click.
I think I gotta get an original Urt Vendilion Click.
They have many arts of Vendilion Click, and they are almost all excellent.
Yeah, I think this one is super charming, and it's much darker than the one that I currently have, and I love the set symbol. So I think that could be a cool pickup. But I love Vendilion Click. I think it's a very, very cool card. Why is it legendary? Can you tell me that? I've always wondered that.
I can. So these 3 fairies are named Visa, Ileona, and Endry, and they are some of the characters in the novel. As far as
Together, they're the Vendilion Click.
they are the Vendilion Click, yes. As far as why they are legendary mechanically, I think it's just because this effect would have been too strong at non-legendary in Standard.
I think it'd be cool if they were called the Vendilion Click. That would have communicated
Sure.
that
Makes
aspect
sense.
to me. But I think this card is sweet. I think blue is one of those. I think blue is a color that you have to be careful with letting them look at their opponent's hand. I know as a player, we're always excited by this. But as a cube designer, I think you should be very careful and intentional about what lets you look at your opponent's hand. I think letting at your opponent's hand removes a lot of tension from the game.
Mm-hmm.
Notably, I don't like Gitaxian Probe most of the time for that reason. I know that blue players love casting it, but I think there's a lot more tension in the game when blue doesn't necessarily just get to see the opponent's hand.
Mm-hmm.
I think that this card is costed such that the initial foray of counterspells aren't... Essentially, this costs more than counterspell. And that means that you don't get to look as early, as opposed to, say, Peak or Gitaxian Probe, where you get to look
Right, yeah.
instantly. Love this one.
Revelark.
Also incredibly cool. Revelark is sweet. Any cube that has Revelark in it, where Revelark is doing interesting things, I'm pretty excited to play.
Yeah. I have it in my Museum of Modern as a piece of the Birthing Pod chain.
Also love Birthing Pod. So
You turn this into a Titan, and then you get back 2 of your lower pieces of the pod chain.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely sweet. This is a good set for future pod, given that it also had the persist creatures, which are very ideal to pod away.
This set doesn't, but the block does.
Yes.
Okay. Countryside Crusher. Have you seen this one very often?
So when I started cubing, this was in the discourse of high power red 3 drops. I don't think it is anymore. I think it's very cool. I actually just picked up a copy because I might put it in Midwinter.
Ooh,
I
yeah.
think
It's a giant.
it is a giant. I think it gets pretty big, but also 1 red is not trivial.
It doesn't have any evasion.
Yeah, exactly. So it gets big, but also I think it's very cool that, if this is big and it's attacking and they're chump blocking and you've got something like Agar out, you're drawing cards.
Ooh, yeah. Really cool with Agar. I love that. My
Really cool.
my concern is that you have the landscape, so I think this will get quite big routinely.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible, but I have been looking for some cards that make you want to lean a little bit more proactive. I think it's pretty fair to say you're going to get to 6 mana, and some of the 6 mana cards are very potent. So I haven't definitively decided this is going in yet, but I think it could be a cool test.
I would be excited to play this card in Midwinter.
Excellent. Well, that's a high endorsement, and as I'm thinking on it here, that's definitely going to increase my likelihood of wanting to do that.
There's a lot of cool giants in Lorwyn Morningtide. They are a tribe.
And then Scape Shift, I am familiar with from playing it in Loam Cube.
Always Loam Cube. If it says land in the rules text.
Yeah, Scape Shift Valakut is a deck I think is really cool in Cube. There are probably some constructed players who hate it. I have no idea if that's true. This is just a guess on my part.
Yes, there are.
I don't hate it. And I think when you have to draft around it, it's pretty interesting to see if it works.
Yeah.
If I recall, I was also involved in convincing you to keep or add this to Museum of Modern.
Yes, you were.
Which is cool. So maybe someday I'll draft it there.
It's a very cool deck to draft around, just like you said. The Scape Shift deck in Museum of Modern's first 3-0 was at the Salt Box, and the player told me that they were playing 43 or 44 cards just because they wanted to have the correct density of mountains to make Valakut work with consistency whenever they were scape shifting, which I thought was a very neat deck building decision.
Yeah, what an incredible thing. I think that makes it correct for you. A 43 deck card deck is awesome.
Yeah.
I've never seen this art, but I really like it. In fact, I think the art direction this set is just really good.
Yeah, it is. I can't wait for you to see how it changes in Shadowmoor, but yes, the Lorwyn Morningtide art direction is fantastic. Some of the best and my favorite pieces after 20 years still.
Fantastic.
Okay, my personal favorites. So we've already talked about Earwig Squad. Sage of Fables may be surprised because I'm not playing Merfolk or Wizards at this time. But I love this card in Amonkar. I have a Wizard theme there. I also like that it just turns any plus counters into draw a card. It does not matter if she's the one who gave you the counters. And she's just a, fair body Grey Ogre 2/2. Whenever you add a plus counters, you'll probably risk trading her in combat with something. But until then, she's a lord for your wizards, kind of. And then any of them that are going to die, get removal spell, or again, if you have plus counters from anything, you can turn them into cards at a pretty fair rate of 2 mana. And it's just a neat little card to build around. Like, oh, this is a wizard. Maybe I'll take it a little bit higher since I've got Sage of Fables.
Did anyone ever play Glenelendra Persist Sage of Fables as the
glue?
Well, the Persist enabler.
Yeah. Not to my experience, but we can check MTG Top 8 after this.
That's fair.
That's an interesting.
We've already learned about
prison.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's a good thing. Just lock you out of non-creature spells for the rest of the game. But Magic players love doing stuff like that. So, holy crap. Lightning Crafter. Champion's a mechanic that I have some residual bad memories of, but only because of a very public misplay I made once on a CubeCon stream involving Champion card. This is a very cool card. Tap Lightning Bolt is quite a line of text.
Yeah, and we've seen it on Kamal Pitfighter recently, but this is quite a discount from Kamal Pitfighter.
Yeah, and Champion's a cool mechanic. So I'm into this one.
I've mentioned my Legacy Goblins deck a couple times, and Lightning Crafter is another one that was in that deck. I want to illustrate a really cool combo that I used to play as an optional finish because all the cards are good already on their own. And Lightning Crafter was kind of the worst one that was just thrown in the deck in case I get combo off. So you can copy your Matron, you can copy your Ringleader. There's all kinds of ways that Kiki-Jiki is a great card to have, whether you're doing anything broken with it or not. And then you have Goblin War Chief that makes Goblin spells cost one less, and all goblins have haste. And you have any sack outlet, so probably Skirt Prospect. You have Crafter on the battlefield, meaning something has been championed. And you tap Kiki-Jiki to target the Crafter. You make a token copy of Crafter, which champions Kiki-Jiki. You tap the token copy to bolt the opponent, then you sack the token copy to Skirt Prospector. Kiki-Jiki comes back untapped, you generate red, so you can do infinite damage and have infinite red mana.
Very cool.
And then finally, Sensation Gorger.
Whoa. That is wild.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's a really good way of refilling your hand in a very aggro deck, but that is one hell of a risk.
Mm-hmm. I love this card in Goblin Commander because it messes up everyone else's hand. But in 1v1, I think it is also fine because Goblin decks are apt to dump their hands. And then this is probably not the most effective Goblin on board. If they have a removal spell, they probably need to spend it on a different Goblin, like if you have a Lord or a creature that's going to recur it or something to that effect that is just more powerful than this 2/2, which might not do anything. That's the crazy thing, is if you've got a land on top, it's really bad. But if you have a Goblin on top, in your upkeep, you discard everything and draw 4 cards, and then you get your draw step as well.
Oh, that's really cool. I didn't catch that. You come out 1 card ahead.
Yes, yeah. You come up 1 card ahead, which I think is super cool. Forcing the opponent to discard a draw 4. There's so many situations in Commander where people will help Gorger get to my upkeep and trigger again because they want the little wheel. And other players will be like, no, I'm going to lose 3 cards. And they'll be like, too bad. I'm going to give Gorger Shroud so that you can't blow it up so that I can try to get that wheel.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you more about the Lorwyn lore at the end of this as we transition to Shadowmoor. But I want to point out here that the Boggarts of Lorwyn, which is what the goblins are called, are obsessed with experiences and sensations and sharing them with each other. And the Sensation Gorger here is experiencing the extremes of sight, smell, sound, taste, and touch. He has little twigs through all of his fingers, which is the touch. And then around his neck, he has hands, eyes, noses, ears, and tongues.
Wow.
Truly an experience.
He has a skunk on his head.
Yeah, that's the maximum smell experience.
I didn't place that as a skunk until right now. That's pretty cool.
Yep. Cool little guy. Okay, moving up. Fun facts about the set. This is the set where Recross the Paths debuts. Shout out Cade with such a good podcast.
Truly is.
But also, if you read Recross the Paths, think about what happens if there's no lands in your library.
You should deck yourself.
No. You order your library however you want.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's wild. I had assumed that because it just continued in one paragraph, they all went away because you never successfully revealed a card from the top of your library.
This would get played in no-land decks like Goblin Charbelcher as a way to set up the perfect combo turn, because you could always reveal your entire library and then order it however you wanted to set it up. And it is believed that this is why they changed so many effects to bottom in a random order instead of in any order, to avoid this happening again.
That's a really cool piece of history.
Do you remember Incandescent Soulstoke from the last set that is a sneak attack for elementals?
Yes.
Well, I told you that my favorite thing to sneak attack in was the 10-2 trample. There's a new favorite thing to sneak attack in.
Yeah, the 10-10 flying.
The most popular thing was Flamekin Harbinger. So you tutor up the thing that you want to hit, put it on top, then you Soulstoke in this, champion the Harbinger, get your hit in, and then whenever this is sacrificed, you get another trigger of the Harbinger, and you can set up a win by putting in 10 damage, 10 damage. Release the Ants. Do you know anything about this card?
I don't know anything about this card. I've never seen it before.
Okay.
Interesting.
This card was a silly win condition in Omniscience decks because they would set their top card to Emrakul.
I was going to ask if you ever deck yourself with an Eldrazi and then just kill them.
Yeah, with Omniscience out, you can just repeatedly deal 1 damage to any target, as long as they don't have a counter spell or a way to interact with the top card of your library. So you just say, if the opponent does not have a card with mana value 15 or higher in the top 20 cards of their library, I win.
That is the coolest use of Omniscience I've ever heard of.
I know. This was the cool way that Omniscience used to win.
Yeah, I am broadly super not fond of that card. Winning with Release the Ants is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, finally, Marilyn of the Morn Song. This elf wizard, check her out.
This is really cool. The fact that you're a opponent gets to do it first is pretty brutal.
Now imagine that the first thing that you get is opposition agent.
Ew. Yeah, that would be pretty nasty. Is that
Yeah.
a thing people do in Commander?
Well, you can. Marilyn is a popular combo commander for that reason and others. It was popular before. It was mostly an ad nauseum commander. Very brutal things can be done with this card specifically. We're about to transition to the flavor. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story, and then we'll have a better understanding of what's about to happen with Shadowmoor. You can see Marilyn here giving an order to the Vendilion Clique, Visa, Endry, and Ileana, on the gravest of tasks.
Ah, okay.
Marilyn is one of the characters from the novel. She is an elf, much like Rhys the Redeemed or Rhys the Exiled. He's the protagonist elf, and then she's like a secondary character that comes up, and they're both elves, but something seems off about her, and she has machinations that play out over the course of the novels, and she executes them through the Vendilion Clique.
Does look like a villain because she's got horns.
All the elves have horns here, except for Rhys.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't think I had noticed that yet. That is a very different aesthetic. I
It
like
is.
it.
Okay, I'll give you some lore then. Yeah, let's skip straight to Rhys there in the center. Notice that he has no horns, that they are broken off. The
Yes.
elves of Lorwyn are more willowy and more like deer than other planes. They have horns, they have hooves, and they're very slender and spindly. They hunt with their wolves and on the backs of what are called servans that are kind of like tall deer creatures. And they rank everything based on beauty, the elven standard of beauty. So there are castes in their society called the Perfects, the Immaculates. Rhys is a famed hunter. He is in an explosion that kicks off the plot that breaks his horns off. Whenever that happens, he gets exiled from elven society because now he's hideous. They call every other species on Lorwyn Eyeblights, and they believe that it is their duty to execute any of the Eyeblights that get in the way of the elven glory.
Oh, yes. I've heard about how Lorwyn elves are racist.
Yeah, they are in some ways the cruelest race on the plane of Lorwyn before it becomes Shadowmoor. But moving up to the fairies in the top right, they are considered mischievous. They're always pranking people, and they are always just like rude little guys, but they're not out here murdering people like the elves. But they do steal dream stuff from sleeping Kithkin and other races. They harvest they harvest some kind of mental energy from the other races, and they deliver it to where they come from, which is a glen called Glen Elendra. That's where Una lives. Una is absorbing all of the energy, and we don't know why.
Okay.
Top left, Ashling is one of the Flamekin. The Flamekin are a species of technically lesser elementals because they refer to the creatures with evoke as the greater elementals. The greater elementals are not sapient. They don't communicate. They act on instinct. They're just essentially large, majestic animals. But the sapient Flamekin revere them, worship them, follow them. Ashling believes that her destiny is to find a specific elemental that's communicated with her and given her visions. And so she's, in the course of the novel, following the other protagonists around trying to find her specific elemental.
Makes sense. Aldrich is a god.
Kind of. I think they're more like spirits that they think are kind of like manifestations of perfection or something greater.
Okay, that makes sense.
The Kithkin, you can see that glowing yellow diamonds around their heads, all have what's called thought weft, and it is a form of telepathy that's low level, something that one Kithkin can sense, all the Kithkin nearby can sense. And if one of them is left-handed, they all know how to use their left hand, so ambidexterity is really common. They're able to act with unnatural coordination because in some ways they're all acting as one entity.
Interesting. So they've got a little hive mind thing going.
And when one of them senses danger, the whole group can sense danger at once. They're across town. There is a limit to its distance, as explained by Brigid, who is the archer, the hero of Kinsbale, and is one of the other protagonists from the book. Okay, Sig is one of the merfolks who helps the party move around. Lorwyn does not have any oceans. It has rivers going all over the Marrow maintain. They are able to water shape magical boats that they can give other people rides. I think the currency in Lorwyn is like string or like golden thread. And the lanes, the Marrow lanes, go wherever you need to go, and they'll take you there for a fee. And they can do what's called tide shaping to make new lanes that go to new locations.
That's really cool.
Then the goblins, the boggarts, as I've already explained, are obsessed with sensations, experiences, and sharing those with each other. The biggest crime in goblin society is selfishness, is experiencing something and not telling anyone else about it.
Some deep lore surrounding these. Also, Sig River Guide has incredible art.
Yeah. The ones that are on here that are not mentioned, the changelings are just kind of weirdos. They just hang out and copy whatever is directly in front of them. They just become a poor imitation, like Ditto, of the thing that is standing in front of them, and then whenever it leaves, they stop being that thing. They also don't appear to have any kind of greater intelligence. They just copy whatever they're standing in front of, and then they stop being it whenever it leaves. The giants are sometimes warlike, sometimes peaceful. There are wizards, there are warriors, they have their own society, but they're so big and there's so few of them that they're kind of aloof and distant from the society of the smaller beings. And then tree folk act as sages and mentors to the elves. That's the only race that the elves actually respect, the tree folk, because they teach them how to do a lot of like nature magic type stuff. Because their lives are so long, that they have a value in teaching the elves something that the other races don't. Okay.
I think I get the overall overview of what all the races of Lorwyn are up to. They turn it on its head.
Yeah, what's about to happen is what's called the Great Aurora. Every like 1,000 years or something, Lorwyn is a land of eternal summer. The sun goes to one horizon, and then right before it sets, goes back the other direction to the other horizon. It never becomes night on Lorwyn. Well, after the Great Aurora, which sweeps through the plane, every denizen of Lorwyn flips, inverts on its axis, unless they're a fairy. The sun becomes a moon, and it never becomes day. Moon will rise high in the sky, then it'll go down to one horizon. It'll act like it's going to dip completely, and then it goes the other direction. And that's when we get to shadow lore. So a lot of the characters are going to flip also. So Aisling at the top left, who was a friendly flamekin on her way to find her greater elemental, finds it at the worst time, and it fills her with a dark energy that allows her to burn hot and extinguish the lives of others.
Wow. I love that art.
It's fantastic art. Wayne Reynolds does not miss. Okay, the Kithkin. So they were always open with their villages. They were tight-knit communities because they had that telepathy, but they didn't mistrust the people that they could not hear the thoughts of until they get to Shadowmoor. In Shadowmoor, the Kithkin are completely xenophobic. They do not let anyone in except under extreme suspicion, and they do not want any other race anywhere near their towns, and they maintain a perimeter with the arrows that Rigid was famous for, and will kill anyone who approaches unless something useful can come out of it.
Starting to see a pattern.
Sig is now the River Cutthroat. He has flipped into a River Raider who just lures people close and then drowns them so that he can take their stuff. Pretty much all the Marrow are this way. If you go near the river in Lorwyn, you can get a ride. If you go near the river in Shadowmoor, you're going to get drowned and stolen from. However, because the elves were awful before, they get flipped into cool people. The elves are the nicest race on Shadowmoor. Their goal is to preserve any beauty they can find in this twisted, horrible world. And they will rescue people who are in danger. They will attempt any way that they can to preserve life and preserve beauty where they can find it.
That is quite a twist.
Mm-hmm. Also,
And
Reese
that's
gets
why
his
Riz
horns
is
back.
redeemed.
Yeah, the Boggarts used to be curious about what everything felt like. They wanted to have experiences that they could share with each other. The Boggarts of Shadowmoor simply want to eat. They want to know what everything tastes like, and they want to devour every other thing they can find, sentient or not.
Yikes.
The tree folk are rude, but they're not like...
They're just grumpy trees instead
They're
of
just
helpful
grumpy
trees.
trees. I mean, they will rampage, of course, but they're not like... It's not their whole job to stand still and then assassinate you if you get too close.
Right.
The giants are largely asleep. A lot of them get moss grown over them and just go to sleep. The ones that are awake are mad about it, and they do a rampage. And then we have Una. Una is the one who has been messing with the plane's structure. Allegedly, we used to have a normal day-night cycle, and Una has been stretching it out so that the days last longer and the nights last longer to harvest some greater power. It's not clear why. But she is behind the way that the plane is broken. She wants nights to stretch longer and longer, and then days to stretch longer and longer. The fairies are unchanged by this. They are little jerks in Lorwyn, and they are Still little jerks in Shadowmoor, but being a little jerk makes you nicer than the average resident of Shadowmoor.
Interesting. And so we never find out why this is the case.
I mean, I read the books. I'm sure there's some explanation. I know that they end with Una being defeated. Spoilers. And the sun rising after her defeat, even though it's only been Shadowmoor for like a month at the onset of the book. It's supposed to last 1,000 years.
Okay, the reason I asked that is I know we're going back to Lorwyn next year. Maybe we'll get Day Night back.
Yeah, that's what people have suspected. Marilyn is involved in the plot to overthrow Una, but she wants to replace her. She doesn't want to just depose her. She wants to become the new queen of the fairies.
Even though she's an elf.
Even though she's an elf,
I presume she's unsuccessful.
Actually, I mean, I think she succeeds. But
well, again,
we'll find out. Okay, so Shadowmoor. The Shadowmoor mechanics, you guessed some of whenever I talked about Lorem before. Hybrid is super heavy here, as well as Wither and Persist, the minus counter mechanics. Only plus counters appeared in Lorwyn and Morningtide. Only minus counters appear in Shadowmoor and Eventide. The other mechanics that we haven't mentioned yet are Conspire. As an additional cost to cast an instant or sorcery with Conspire, you can tap 2 creatures that share a color with it. If you do, copy it.
Embarrassingly, I was looking at a card that did this 30 minutes before we started.
What card was that?
Some Lord of the Rings card.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to use it in that set. And then the untap symbol. Have you seen the untap symbol before?
I have seen the untap symbol before.
Yeah, that comes from this set. That was not very popular and will probably not return. All right, so Shadowmoor is allied colored hybrid, because it's a large set, and ally gets more importance than enemy at this time in Magic's history. The Eventide will be the small set, will be enemy color, but will not have the same amount of support due to being a small set. So, first up, just for Jake, we've got some Persist cards, and there's a Conspire card for you to look at later.
Big Puppeteer Click fan.
Oh, you are? Good. I guess well.
Yes, I think this card is very cool. Really just no notes. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. What do you think about Fury Stoke Giant if you're like an Aristocrats deck?
Oh, that's sick. Oh, they're creatures you control can tap, shock. Yeah, that's really cool. I've never seen this card before. This is also just a great go wide card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is really neat. It is. I think I say for Aristocrats specifically because I think it's so interesting if you have a big board that you can sack for like Blood Artist triggers. But if you play this first, you have this way to get an extra damage without having to go through combat with every one of your things before you sack them. And you can sack this twice.
Yeah, that's very cool. And you can also, tap them down, do your damage, and then sack it to persist and get that ability again the next turn. Yeah, I like it a lot.
Hell the Night Pack, once again, make a bunch of dogs. Thinking of Jake.
Very reasonable. That's cool. So if you have other creatures, you just make 2 4/4 hasters for a turn for 3 mana.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a beating.
It's also one of my favorite things to populate.
Yeah, I can see that.
Cool for cubes. Have you seen Twilight Shepherd before?
No, but I love this art.
The art is so good. It's obviously not the same style as Lorwyn, but it is similar energy. Some of the pieces are just gorgeous.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm sure I've seen this when I've just typed Oracle Persist into Scryfall, but I've never really internalized what it does. I think this is a really cool card.
You can go all in on combat. Maybe they're expecting you to Trumpet Blast or something. Let all your stuff die, and you main phase 2 this thing. You get all your dead stuff back. And then you have Wrath Insurance after that, because it's going to come back one more time, and anything else that died, boom, come back again.
Yeah, and back to hand is very manageable.
You would think it would be Battlefield. Like, if it was 2020, this would be everything is back to the Battlefield that died.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And you'd get an extra combat step, and it would be a legend. Yeah. But I think that there's something really elegant about this, and the Persist sort of gives it a Muldriftery vibe anyway. Right? Like, it's a 6 mana 5/5 Flying Vigilance that dies into a 4/4 Flying Vigilance, irrespective of the other stuff. That's just a reasonable rate a lot of the time.
Dusk Urchins used to be really popular.
Yeah, I can see why this would be really popular. That's just a cool design.
Even just attacking with a 3/2 for 3 that when it dies draws you a card is like a neat floor.
Right, but you really got to think about what you're using here and when. Yeah, I like that a lot.
I think Curse of Chains is cool to put in a white-blue hybrid slot because you get narcolepsy effects all the time in blue, but you don't often get this effect in white. It's usually a pacifism. It's not an actual tapper. So the fact that this is hybrid is really cool to me.
This is really cool with the Wilds of Eldraine tap.
Yes. Whenever you tap something an opponent controls, you get a bonus of some kind.
Yeah, in fact, it makes me think this would have been a really cool Enchanting Tales card.
I agree. I think they wanted this to be more consistent in color, and that having like one be hybrid may have been too weird.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's just that would be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you seen this wart before?
Maybe, but I had to read it right now.
She's in Arcane Lessons. She's one of my favorite commanders. When I have to play commander, this is where I reach.
I can definitely see that. I think this is a cool Arcane Lessons card. On the expensive side, but it also just gives you the tokens that you need to
Mm-hmm.
conspire right
Yeah.
away. Yeah, I like it.
In 2008, I totally misunderstood Conspire because as you play the spell, you can tap 2 untap creatures that share color with it. When you do, copy it. And I thought, okay, you're copying it, so you're playing another spell. So I thought that you could cast Dragon Fodder and then copy it, and then you make 2 tokens, and
Just
then you
infinite dragon
and then
fathers.
yeah, and then you'd use the tokens to tap to copy the copy. As long as you had 4 tokens to like get started, that you could go forever. Because then you keep doing copies that you can conspire in with your last 2 tokens, and that's not at all how it worked. But that just tells you how bad I was at Magic 3 years into playing the game.
I think that's really cool. And those sort of kitchen table early Magic memories are special.
They certainly are. And now I love her still, even understanding how she actually works. And of course, Wart Bogart is one of my favorite cards, so
Right.
I
You're
had to
still a
love the
Ward
mirrored
fan.
version. Okay, cube staples from this set. First time printing of Spectral Procession, Fulminator Mage, Murderous Redcap, and Wiltleaf Liege.
Is Wiltleaf Liege a cube staple?
I think it used to be, because a 4/4 on rate for 4 that also lords all your other stuff in the go wide deck. And if the opponent's playing Lily Veil, you get to play for free. Pretty
Yeah, that checks
good.
out. I believe you. That's the well, to be fair, I've only really seen Murder's Redcap in a ton of cubes out of all of these, but I'm familiar. Wiltleaf Liege is the only one I had to read on this page.
Oh,
So
really? That's interesting. I would have considered it at least as iconic as Murderous Redcap.
that's entirely fair. I could be totally off base. Sound off in the comments if what do you think is more popular, Wiltleaf Liege or Murderous Redcap, and which one is the cube staple?
Oh, I'm sure Murderous Redcap wins that, but I would have thought that they were at least as well known as the
I
others.
suspect that whichever card Joe likes more is going to win because he'll leave
Well,
19
he
comments.
likes Murderous Redcap, obviously.
It is the red card, but I bet he likes Fulminator Mage the most of all the cards on this page.
Fulminator, by the way, really good in Standard at this time, especially because damage uses the stack. So this trades with some other
It's
2/2
for
and then
one.
kills a land on the way out.
Shock, Vindicate your land.
Yeah, extremely potent card, especially with the set that comes out in 2 sets from this.
Love it.
All right.
Very, very cool.
My personal favorites. I loved Ashmore Liege because I was playing Black-Red Goblins. I didn't fully switch over to Red-Green Goblins when the Green Goblins came out because there weren't a lot of good Red-Green ones. And most of these Red-Green Goblins I could just play in my Red-Black deck because they were they were hybrid. So like actual mono-green goblins weren't really worth playing to me. So I just kept playing Black-Red. And in that case, Ashmore Liege becomes good, especially because all my Goblin tokens at the time are Black Goblin Rogues. They're not Red Goblins like we play today.
Right.
Boartusk Liege was cool, and I played it for sure because it was a Goblin with Trample. But the plus ability actually didn't help me that much because, again, a bunch of my Goblins are mono black, and I'm not playing any other green ones except for Boggart Ram Gang.
This card I've seen. I think it's very cool.
Yeah, I enjoy this cycle of triple hybrid pip cards. And then Reaper King, I just love Scarecrows. I think this character is so cool. I played this as a commander again for a long time. Just ways to blink your Scarecrows to get endless Vindicates. The win condition for this deck used to be Rite of Replication kicked, targeting Reaper King, because you get to Vindicate 25 permanents if it resolves.
All right, that is cool. 25 Vindicates is so many.
25 Vindicates is usually sufficient to end a commander game, believe it or not.
I believe that. Mass land destruct all your opponents, and then they'll quit.
Yeah.
So you win.
And you know what's crazy is they won't concede to 1 Vindicate. So we know that the commander concession threshold is somewhere between 1 and 25. Sound off in the comments if you know where the line is. All right, fun facts about the set. So Drove of Elves here. Again, this is just going to be me telling on how stupid we were as 17-year-olds playing this game. Drove of Elves, we thought that forests were green permanents because they had a green pinstripe. So Drove of Elves was always like, at minimum, a 5/5 hexproof when my opponents would play it. And usually it would be like an 11/11 hexproof for 4. And I was like, I'm playing red. How could I ever beat that?
Yeah, it's a classic.
Heartmender here is really interesting in the Persist deck specifically because you can't combo with it, but every single upkeep you get to undo any of your Persist creatures that died, including itself. So you can like jump block with all your Persisters, and if they don't have follow-up removal, then you just get to sweep all your counters off and do it again.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. This art is wild.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a boar spider snake.
Yep. Rebecca Gay, doing the best.
That That's a wild. Mercy killing is insane.
Mercy killing was my win condition when I recently played Showdown at the Auk Corral. Shout out Jesse. I would mercy killing my own Auk to make 4/11s, and that was how I win, was just beating up with those 4/11s. But again, we were so dumb in 2008. We read this as target creature's controller sacrifices it. Then put X11s into play, where X is that creature's power.
So this is just the greatest removal spell ever printed.
Yes! I was like, all right, idiot, you played your 6/6 elemental. Boom! I'm going to make 6/11s.
Love it.
But we learned. And this spell is very cool. Target creature's controller sacrifices it, getting around like indestructible or like just being very big was really cool for us later.
Yeah.
And then, do you know about the Seismic Swans combo?
No.
Okay, so here, read Swans of Bryn Argol.
So my guess is I don't know how. I look at this and I think you can deck yourself with Orcish Bowmasters. So, but
Good.
that obviously didn't exist, but I assume there's something similar going on where you're translating damage to cards and back and forth until someone's decked. Oh, that would do it.
40 lands, Seismic Assault, Swans of Bryn Argol. Every land is 2 more cards, and if you end up with 10 lands in hand, you win the game.
Red, blue-white hybrid, blue-white hybrid.
Yep. And the mana fixing that comes in Shadowmoor Eventide, the filter lands, makes that kind of thing quite possible in Standard.
Yes. Okay, that's pretty cool. Anything Seismic Assault is doing to win is cool.
Mm-hmm. This is a super cool combo that the first time I lost to it, I was baffled by. Okay, next up, Eventide, the final member of the Mega Block, Lorewing Shadowmoor. This is enemy color hybrid themed. We also have the Chroma and Retrace mechanics. I know you know Retrace. Do you know Chroma?
Chroma is prototype Devotion.
Correct.
Right?
Yes, that's right. So we don't have any yet, but I think I do have at least one Chroma card in here somewhere. If not, I'll explain it. Just for you, check out Soul Snuffers and think of it kind of like a weird chupacabra.
I think that's, including itself,
Mhm.
that's so interesting. I think that's really cool. I love the art on this one.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, that art is incredible. I think it's a really interesting card, and I think it might be really perfect for a project I'm working on where 2 toughness is going to be a really significant threshold to overcome. So,
Ooh, good.
Lara's Battalion. Love cards like this.
The thing I think is cool about Talar's Battalion is that it's ripe for effects like Unearth, Aether Vial, like anything that is just putting things in because their mana value is low and gets around these casting restrictions is really neat to me.
I am not surprised that you like cards that are specifically good at being unearthed.
Yeah. Shocker.
But also, yeah, I mean, you drop like 1 drop into this on turn 3, you're really happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Elves deck could do it routinely.
Hobgoblin. That's the goofiest magic art I've ever seen in my entire life.
A huge
What is he
dragonfly?
riding? Oh, okay.
He's a little
Yeah.
guy. He's the little guy on the back of the huge dragonfly.
Right, I follow you. Dragoons ride things.
Mm-hmm. This is on here because A, it's a knight, and B, it's very good with equipment. It's begging you to put like a bone splitter or something on it and just go to town.
That's definitely true. Very cool. The
So-
eyes freak me out though.
Yeah,
Like,
for example,
I-
I was thinking like Midwinter, where you had like a Goblin's Matter card and a Knight's Matter card in roughly these colors.
That's an interesting thought. I honestly think that the giant dragonfly is just sort of like the flavor would be really hard for me to justify, but I think the card is really interesting.
That's fair. I think dragonflies famously don't survive the cold.
But I like it. The arts are growing on
Oh,
me. I think
sorry.
it's really good.
It's a cicada. We need to correct the record. This is a giant cicada, which also don't
I
survive
was-
the cold.
I was just ready to take your word on it. All right. Well, somehow I find Doomgape less jarring to look at. Obviously, I'd rather run into the Hobgoblin Dragoon in real life, but this is a 7 mana 10/10 trample that eventually eats itself.
And when it does, you gain 10 life. Pretty cool.
That is pretty interesting.
This gives me big Strixhaven pest Witherbloom vibes.
Yeah, if the Peasant Strixhaven looked like this, the lore would be way cooler.
I meant the effect, but sure.
Oh, yeah, that's true. As a whole, yeah, if you called this a prototype pest, that seems pretty accurate. Maybe when we come back, they'll be a little more Doomgapey.
Maybe. What a sentence. Oh, one last thing before we move on. Soul Snuffers, I always thought was a huge guy. with a little guy on the pillar, like paying homage to the huge guy. But because his staff is in front of the pillar, you can see that it's actually two normal sized guys that are just far apart.
That is very cool. Nice work, Izzy.
Nice work, Izzy. Cool for cubes. Now, I famously hate Sunfall, and I'm not a big fan of Terminus, but something about Hallowed Burial is just very charming to me.
I saw Hallowed Burial on this slide. It's like, well, time for either a 1 hour tangent or we both just acknowledge this card is cool, which I think it really is.
I mean, maybe it's the
I don't
nostalgia
agree.
because it's hitting me right in the 2008, but I think it is so much cooler than Terminus and Sunfall and Farewell.
I think that's a totally reasonable argument for you to make. Right? I think there's something cool about a 5-mana Wrath that makes you excited to cast it relative to Day of Judgment or Wrath of God or Damn or Damnation and so on. And honestly, I think in cubes where you don't want Sunfall in, which I think is a very reasonable thing, this is probably a really cool choice for you to take a look at. Probably way undercubed.
Yeah, I think so. And the art is just fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it was Arlo that suggested this in the midst of Sunfall Gate and the discussion of where and when Sunfall should be cubed. If not, my bad.
It's Arlo coded,
What?
complimentary. Cache Raiders, I just put into Amonkar for the potential with landfall as well as with sagas and other ETB creatures.
Wild. I'd be excited to play a cube where this was effective.
We have had 3 and a green 4/4s that do this, but with just creatures. Every upkeep you have to bounce a creature to your hand, and then it's a really effectively statted 4/4/4. But this being a 4/4/5 and making it any permanent, I think is a pretty cool widening of that scope without making it feel oppressively powerful. Because if it was overstated 4/4/4 and was giving you recurrent value every single turn, I think it could feel kind of busted to the opponent. But I think
That's interesting.
being 5 and requiring you to get to your upkeep with ostensibly a downside attached is, I think, writing that line just right.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear how it plays. I can definitely see circumstances where you can start making them pick their own board apart using this, but I think the aspirational component of this is really cool.
Knucklevy. Have you seen this one before?
No, but that art is insane.
Spooky art. 7 eyes.
All right, I'm sold. I can see a lot of cubes where this would be sweet.
Kind of a weird big mole drifter for cards from your graveyard, but being hybrid I think is so neat here because you can get back red sorceries in a red deck, blue instants in a blue deck. Either kind of deck is happy to play this after their big red sorcery or big blue instant, and then if you're playing a Spellslinger deck that is both colors, you can get both kinds of things, get maximum value.
Very, very cool.
And
I
then
have seen.
Hedgemage,
How are you going to?
Dwergar.
Okay, I was also going to pronounce it Dwergar Hedgemage, which I believe is correct, but I expect people will tell us if we're wrong.
Duergar. I don't know the alternative. Yeah, this one's cool, I think. Kind of like a proto Lorien.
Proto-Lauren is a good way to describe this card.
Gotta be in the right colors. Okay. Cube staples. I don't think any disagreements will come from these. Flicker Wisp, Archmage, which you've already mentioned, or Archmage, Worm Harvest, and Figure of Destiny.
Certainly no disagreements from me. I personally love Flicker Wisp.
Me too.
Don't cube it with DFC lands.
Don't do that. Love the art. So creepy.
Yeah, it really is. I love that they just turned the artist loose with this. Like, coming up with this is a feat of imagination in some respects.
Mm-hmm.
It's also huge. I like the whatever Masters art that shows this holding a human because it makes you realize that this is gigantic.
Double Masters 2022.
Yeah. Well, it just makes you realize that the hand thing is human size. It kind of looks like the Sarlacc pit in Star Wars, but on wings.
I'm reminded of H.R. Geiger in Alien.
Okay, I can see that too.
The face huggers, but huge.
Either way, this thing could pick you up.
Yeah,
and
that's
horrifying.
Yeah, I like this effect a lot, but I like the art a little bit less now because it scares me.
Yeah, I think this effect is really cool, and I think it's very cool that it holds up so well in so many places, and it scales with environments really well.
Yeah, it's still a staple in Legacy, in Death and Taxes, after 20 years almost.
Yeah, you get pre-war formal back with it, right?
Yep, that's right.
Rather you get it back with pre-war formal than you flicker it, and then you can do that in Bodleian Cube too, which I think is
pretty
a lot of fun. But I also think this just goes in a lot of other cubes. It's kind of beautiful in that respect. Someday I think they'll print a version that doesn't hit lands, which
they have.
Well, but hits everything else. All of the other, like Guardian of Ghirapur only hits creatures and artifacts and only stuff you control. Unless you meant Felia.
I guess I did.
Like, I guess Felia is 2025 Flicker Wisp, kind of, but that feels a little sacrilegious to say. But they're pretty stingy with any permanent bounce effects. It's also sweet with Overlords.
Ooh, yeah. But yeah, I guess Philly is the main reason for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love flickering Overlords with this. It feels, I don't call it fair, but it feels really cool. And it feels rare enough that it doesn't feel oppressive.
That's the hope. But, if it happens one too many times, like with Burrow and the phasing land,
Yeah,
then
I
it's just
agree.
it's just too well supported and you gotta make a change or accept that you've done something gross.
Totally agree. And then we've got Glendolendra.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really classic card.
Yep. Good combo protector.
Yeah, because I'm excited to see Glendolendra in cubes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have a real soft spot for cards that have made their way out of vintage cubes.
Yeah.
That sort of herald back to a time when the game was a little bit slower, and I think that this is one of the best examples of that.
Do you know Worm Harvest best from Loam Cube?
Yep,
I had a feeling.
I do. I originally drafted that cube when Hogak was still in it.
Oh no!
And so
Wow.
I 3-0'd my first Lone Cube draft with a deck that had Worm Harvest, Hogak, Tarmogoyf, and Handweir Battlements
Oh wow.
to give Hogak haste. I definitely drew hot, but 3-0ing a cube like Lone Cube the first time you draft it feels pretty incredible.
Yeah, I imagine so.
I went in blind. Probably one of my best Magic accomplishments that I have under my belt. And Worm Harvest was really good in that. Great, great card at letting you cast Hogak over and over again.
Yeah. Black and green worms, useful for convoking.
Yeah.
Figure of Destiny, the first leveler kind of card.
I think I'm going to get some hate for this, but I'm ready for it. I'm not a Figure of Destiny fan.
It's a pretty mild way to put it. I don't think you're going to hate for not being a fan.
I don't know. People really like this card. I think level up mechanics are cool. They tell a nice story, but they're annoying to track in paper. This one is at least symmetrical, which means you can kind of use dice. But yeah, this card just doesn't do it for me on the nostalgia front. And I get that it's both red and white, which is cool, but I like two-color aggro decks a lot. That's how I feel about it.
Sure.
It's definitely a cube staple.
Yeah.
Can't deny that that's the case. Not trying to say it isn't. Just
Not
a card that sparks a lot of joy for me.
Sure. Well, it's not in Bodleian.
No, it isn't.
Okay. My personal favorites. So, I liked Dominance of Fealty a lot. I think at your upkeep, borrowing a permanent until no turn and then giving it back is really neat. Whenever Planeswalkers get more prevalent, that was one of my favorite things to take, and then use an ability of the Planeswalker and then give it back. Unless I minus it completely and then it goes away. I think in two-player,
Very
this
cool.
most often is going to be a 4/4 flyer that kills the opponent by being a 4/4 flyer.
But it's got some Zealous Conscripts vibes.
Yeah, I have fond memories of this card from Commander. Balefire Liege puts one or both parts of Lightning Helix onto all of your spells that are red or white.
Yeah, so you're entering your Boros era here.
I have
It
been
feels like
Boros since the beginning, if you recall, my very first product.
So I do, but it seems like you were drifting to non-Boros colors a
That's
little
true.
bit there.
I'm playing a lot of Black Goblins at the time, but
Right.
I never took
starting to
apart
see
my
in the
Boros
personal
deck.
favorites. All right, fair enough. But I'm starting to see the red-white cards show up in your personal favorites more. And
That's
I
true.
did ask you, at what point you were a full convert to this and said we would track it. So we're calling back to that here and
Yes, yeah.
taking note of the Boros cards.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Love the art.
There's not a lot of stuff to do with Black Goblins in these sets, so I'm having to revert to my origins. Yes, I also love the art. Rise of the Hobgoblins, I actually couldn't ever afford whenever it was new. I always wanted this card.
It's basically fourth Aerolingus.
It's basically fourth Aerolingus that just sits around and gives you 2 red and white chroma pips.
Oh, this is an enchantment. I thought this was a sorcery.
Nope.
Never mind.
Well, it does say it comes into play.
Yeah, you're right. I read a lot of cards tonight.
You did, that's true. Yeah, so since I didn't talk about it up until now, Chroma, as Jake said, Proto-Devotion, Chroma is something that counts the number of mana symbols, but it always counts in different zones, and it landed with a thud. Nobody liked it. And then whenever they're doing Theros, it gets the facelift of always counting the battlefield. And then Devotion, having a huge, great flavor tie-in in Theros, became really popular. So in Shadowmoor Eventide, specifically Eventide, which is the only set that it comes in, white and red count the symbols on the battlefield. Blue and green count symbols in your library or in your hand. and black counts the black symbols in your graveyard for various outcomes.
Did you say library?
Yeah, so sanity grinding is a popular one from this era that is blue, blue, blue. Reveal your top 10 cards of your library. The opponent mills a card for each blue mana symbol in the top 10 cards of your library.
Okay, so you're revealing them. That's more reasonable than I imagined, but still really cumbersome.
Imagine you're playing that Dominus of Fealty over there, and you're playing 4 copies in your deck, and each one that you reveal mills the opponent 5 cards that are in your top 10 cards. It's a pretty
Definitely
effective
potent.
deck.
You've used recross the paths to
to stack
stack
your
your entire
library.
deck.
So
No, I'm just thinking from a gameplay perspective, it's really cumbersome. Because your
yes.
opponent's going to want to read all 10 cards.
Yeah, probably. They go to the bottom in a random order. So
They do, but that's a lot of info on your deck that they probably are interested
that's
in.
true. Well, they're hopefully they're dead, but yeah, maybe they'll want to read
Fair.
it. Anyway, so this is an enchantment because red and white count your mana symbols on the battlefield. So this sitting out, giving you red, red, or white, white was used.
That makes sense.
And then I love Reaper King, so of course I love the Queen, Scarecrow.
This card I didn't know was from this era, but the original Jumpstart came out pretty close to when I started playing, and there was a Scarecrow pack, so I had a copy of this card very early in my Magic career. And I always wanted it to be good, but didn't actually own enough artifact creature cards in order to make it good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I always aspired to have a deck where it was good.
Fun facts about the set before we move on to the final set of the year, which you still have not figured out?
Nope.
Okay, great. Springjack Shepherd here, Chroma. Count the number of white symbols you have in play. Make a goat for each one. This is the cover card for the Shepherd Cube, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, it is.
There's also a guy who on Reddit for a long time on Magic TCG would try to brew a modern deck that made Springjack Shepherd really good. And it was all kinds of crazy Soul Sisters, Impact Trimmers, all kinds of crazy things that would just turn making a bunch of goat tokens into a winning strategy in modern. This was before Horizons, but still.
I think these are the same person. When I met the owner of the Shepherd Cube, I feel like he told me about trying to brew this card in modern a lot. So it is possible that this is the same person.
That would be so cool. Okay, now I hope
we can find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. Helix Pinnacle. So there is a card called Ceton from Odyssey. Ceton is the Croson Protector he is a Centaur Druid that says tap and untap Druid you control, add green. And then there is another card in this block, in Morningtide, sorry, that has whenever you cast a Druid spell, draw a card, and tap 7 Druids you control, gain control of all the target player's lands. So I brewed a janky Druids deck that was all Mana Dorks, Llanowar Elves, all those that just ramp into having a bunch of dorks. If I have my way, I take all my opponent's lands, but the win condition was Helix Pinnacle, making a ton of mana and just winning the game.
That's cool. That's so janky, but this card just asks you to do something janky with it.
It's true. It says if you can make 100 mana, you can win next turn.
Yeah, over any number of turns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, of course, the best thing to do is just to fireball your opponent if you make 100 mana. But if you're just in mono green and you've got a bunch of mana, here's something you can do. And yeah, exactly like you said, you can put stuff in it over time. Because it has Shroud, you can't target it with Gilderbairn, for example, to double the number of counters on a permanent. You'd have to proliferate it. You'd have to find ways to choose this permanent and then double its counters or increase its counters. You can Vorinclex it. That's true. Pay 6, add 12. Pretty good rate.
Yeah, if you haven't killed them over 6 turns with your 6/6 trample haste creature, you can instead get 100 tower counters.
Yeah, but this card fascinated me for a long time.
I love it.
Still Moon Cavalier. Check this card out. Just give me your impression of this card.
So I don't like protection from colors.
I know.
But leaving that where it is, this is a very cool design.
This is a very cool design. It was very easy for me to kill because it has 1 toughness and I play red. But it's very good against all of the white and black control type decks that are in this era because they can't block it. Right. They can't kill it with their removal spells. What are they going to do? The reason it's here, besides the fact that I have nostalgia for it, I think the art's really cool, Cade has been playing this in Vintage because it's very good at taking the initiative.
That's pretty funny. And I can see that, especially because I think the typical initiative deck there is white, right?
Yes.
You're using the 3 mana one.
Mm-hmm. So if you have the initiative, you can block their white creatures. And if you need the initiative, they can't block you. Now the problem is that like seasoned engineer will attack you eventually with and give something protection from everything or protection from creatures, and you can't block it at all. But if they don't have that, if they have the orc, then you can just block the orc and never die.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. I also like, from a design perspective, that this gives two of the keywords that white and black share, so that they're both hybrid
Yes,
costs
it's
as
very
opposed to
clever.
one
It
black and
is
one white.
it is referencing some cards that go back a long time, like Order of Leetbur, which I would be surprised if you know,
Nope.
and Stromgald Crusader. White and black have been doing mirrored pairs of knights in white and black that have opposite keywords, exactly like this. Protection from the other color, mana, gain a keyword, 2 mana, get +1/+0. And this is a reference to all of them at once on a single card.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that, I mean, that's true even today, right? We have Night of Dawn's Light and Dusk's Shadow in
Mm-hmm.
DMU,
Yeah,
even,
it
which
goes
don't have protection.
it goes back to Alpha's White Knight and Black Knight, but
Yep.
in I think Ice Age we start getting these keyword ability knights, and then they're echoed in Cold Snap, and then this is like kind of the ultimate synthesis of both of them.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. And the art is great.
Cool, yeah, cool card, great design. And then I just wanted you to see the spirit token. Isn't that awesome?
It is.
You can use this for Afterlife if you're cool.
That is true.
Okay, so that's it for the first 3 sets of the year. So we're coming up on the last one, but first we got to take a break, have a chat about our time traveling sponsors. Do you have any guess who the sponsors are going to be for 2008? I bet you. I mean, there's no way, but I wonder what your suggestion might have been.
I would, if you had asked me first, I would have guessed Marvel for Iron Man. But no, I'm totally unsure what we're gonna get here.
Okay, well, it's 2008, and just like the rest of the United States, the channel's fallen on hard times. This is the height of the financial crisis. And so we've had to dig a little deeper for sponsors this time, and I just want you to keep that in mind as I present our next 2 sponsors. First off, SpaceX's Falcon 1 rocket is the first successful private launch into orbit. What a promising tech company. I'd love to watch their future.
If anyone from SpaceX is watching this, you should be embarrassed that you work there.
You're not going to feel any better about the second sponsor, Jake.
Is it Twitter? Oh.
Well,
Bones, why are you doing this?
So, a black man has just won the presidency in 2008, and the outrage farm is about to hit peak production. Over half the boomers in your life are about to turn on the brain damage station and never turn it off.
Yeah, similarly to SpaceX, if you like Fox News, you should be more embarrassed.
Truly. Yeah, the only other thing I had like as a bit for 2008 was the writer's strike ended. So I was like, sponsored by the Writers Guild of America. We're back and ready for business. Give us some scripts.
Couldn't have been like the Obama campaign or,
That's not a company.
That's sort of true.
Oh. Really makes you think. All right, whatever. Moving on. And yeah, if it's not clear, screw these guys.
Yeah, no, if it's not clear, Bones and I have made our thoughts on this very clear. That's not what I expected to see in the middle of the slideshow. But I gotta say, you got me pretty good.
Gotta catch Jake off guard.
Oh, we're on Alara.
We're on Alara! We're on one of, in my opinion, the best sets and blocks ever made. What a banger.
I'm so ready for some of the questions about cards from Bodley and Cube in 2009.
It's kind of shocking that you have none from Shards.
I guess we'll find out what's in Shards, and we'll decide if that's shocking, or at least I'll decide if that's shocking as we go along.
So some of the groundbreaking things from this. So you may have noticed that we've gone through all of 2008. This is the last set of the year, and there was no core set. 10th edition was the last core set in the traditional line of core sets, as we talked about last year. The change that they made this year was extending the previous block into a bonus. So last one, the very first time we talked, Cold Snap was the small set in the middle of the year, and it wasn't connected to anything else. Well, this year, instead of doing a core set or a weird set, they just gave a 4th set to Lorwyn to make 2 mini blocks, a single mega block. Well, now we've taken stock, and we're going to not ever do a mega block again, and we're about, either next year or the year after that, we're about to see M10 completely change the way that core sets work.
Wait, M10's coming next year?
It's either next year and they do it a year ahead so that it will stay on shelves. I remember that being a logic reason that they like, because if you do it in 2010 and it says M10, then as soon as January hits, people will take it off shelves, and it's only going to be there for 6 months. I think that was their
Well, I mean,
logic for doing it a
so
year
even
ahead.
that makes sense because, well, I'm not sure about the sales tactic, but M21 came out in 2020, and I know that.
So yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's the same here. I'm not 100%, but almost certain. But anyway, so what I'm trying to get at is that we did make a bunch of changes in Shards of Alara after taking stock of the situation after Shadowmoor. One of those is intro packs. Theme decks are dead, the things that I showed you, the last 3 sets, and now we have intro packs instead, which contain 40 card decks and a booster pack. It is an intro to the game. Gets you in with an almost full deck, a booster pack to get started, and then you need to finish out the deck that you've got kind of a head start on. We still have tournament
Okay.
packs, which is on the right side here, but this is the last set with tournament packs. Those are going to get phased out as well. This is the first set with the mythic rarity, the first set
That's interesting.
with planeswalkers since Lorwyn. They did the 5 and then they stopped completely, and now we're getting more planeswalkers for the first time.
Yeah, that makes sense. So they, wanted to
You got to test them out.
essentially get the feedback on them before they made more.
And these ones, some of these are gold, which is again the first ever gold planeswalkers. And then this is the first time that colored artifacts are going to appear as more than just a single gimmick. So we got Sarcomite Mirror in Time Spiral Block, which was a blue artifact for the first time ever. Then we got Reaper King, which is a hybrid artifact. Technically is colors, but is also, you can cast it for 10 colorless mana if you want. For the first time
Right.
on Esper, we're going to get colored artifacts as a whole theme. And only in the future will we get colored artifacts as a normal thing in core sets, like equipment, like Embercleave.
I think colored artifacts are a great change to the game as a whole. I'm excited to see how they started.
What are the mechanics of Bant, Grixis, and Jund?
Bant is exalted.
Oh, hey, it's right there on the box.
Well, this I know.
This you knew already.
Jund has some sacrifice stuff going on, right?
Jund has some sacrifice stuff. The mechanic involves sacrificing creatures. It has a name, though.
It's Devour.
Yep, bingo.
Rixis
You know
is...
Grixis.
It's affinity for artifacts, right?
Grixis?
Oh. Sorry. Nope. I'm looking at the Esper deck.
Yeah.
Thinking of the Esper cards.
The Esper's theme is our artifacts are not colorless. Isn't that crazy? There is no unifying keyword.
Okay, and then Grixis is... I should know this, but I don't.
Unearth.
Oh, all right.
Naya does not have a keyword. It is power 5 or greater matters. It does not have a keyword.
That checks out.
Okay. So, just for Jake. As you called out, Jund is all about sacrificing things and dying, and that is what I associate with Jake most of the time. So, here we have Goblin Assault. Make a little guy that's probably going to die every turn.
Very cool. Goblin Rebel Master doesn't exist yet, right?
No, not even close.
So this is the second half of Goblin Rebel Master without a body.
And doesn't go away when they wrath.
That's true. I like it a lot.
It's very cool, I think. One of my favorite cards for quite a while. Hissing Iguanar. Blood Artist. It's half a Blood Artist. When any creature dies, ping the opponent.
Yeah. Big Hissing Iguanar fan.
How do you feel about Michaeloth?
This card was in the Alara draft we did at Vertex Philly.
Almost. Jake's referencing my custom set, Alara Reimagined, where I reimagined the Alara block as a modern set, the way that it would look. And one of the cards is a riff on Michaeloth, and it does something very similar to Michaeloth, but not quite the same. Mine's more like a Titan that is an ETB or attacks instead of just every upkeep. And it's only Devour 1. It's at a smaller scale. So Michaeloth here, Devour 2, only in your upkeep.
Yeah, I like this card a lot. I think it's very cool. That custom Alara set is definitely breaking my brain a little bit.
Yep. I was worried about that.
When you asked me the mechanics, when you said Naya didn't have a keyword, I had to remind myself that it in fact doesn't have a keyword.
Yep. I made one up because it didn't have one.
It's probably one of the only times in the history of Magic where someone has drafted a custom reimagined set, but not the
knowing
actual
anything
set.
about the original. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Michaeloth is very cool. Love the art.
This was in standard with the all the saplings from Time Spiral. That's pretty neat. Eat your sapling tokens to get twice as many tokens.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
What more could you ask for? But you have to have it survive for a turn, so you got to make sure they're not murdering it.
That's true. We're not worried about spot removal in kitchen table.
That's true. Well, sometimes we are.
What do you think about Sark and Vol?
I think it's wild that the first Sarkon is Gruul. I don't think I knew that. 5 4 dragon creatures into play. That is not that far away from the start. Was this card played and like actually ulted? Like he only needed to be around for 3 turns to do that.
Yeah.
That seems
It's
like you
not
could
hard to do.
actually achieve that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I think that's cool. I like Planeswalkers that can ult on the 3rd turn.
Mhm.
Though, again, this to me has one of the key aspects of Planeswalkers that I like, which is that it has to spend loyalty to affect the board by itself. The +1 impacts the board if you already have stuff.
Just like the Wandering Emperor.
Right. The -2 is, of course, much less potent than exiling a creature most of the time, I think. But
Well, if you have a sack outlet,
I'll-
it's pretty good.
look, I love stealing and then sacking a creature.
That's why it's in the slideshow, by the way. That's why it's in
Yeah.
the Just for Jake page.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely fair. So Captivating Crew, I'm sure will come up sometime in the future. But like, I was just playing with that card last week in a midwinter draft, and I cast it, and the table collectively groaned. That was in my very first ever kitchen table deck, and it just immediately was removed. I feel like my friend just had rage in his eyes as he killed the card immediately, and so I love this effect, but maybe too much.
Maybe.
Green red is such an interesting spot for it to be, though.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the most interesting components about this card is it could just be red. But
That's true. Oh, you've made me look at it in a different light now. You're absolutely correct.
like, there's actually nothing green about this card. I mean, I guess haste is a thing green gets.
Actually,
two.
giving all of your creatures +1/+1 is green. Red
Oh,
would give your team
okay.
+1/+0. That's the only green thing about this card.
Okay, no, you're right. That's totally fair. But I like Sarkon. The fact that it affects the board in this way, it makes it like way built around here than I think the average Planeswalker feels like it is.
Yeah. Okay. Cool for cubes. I think Battlegrace Angel is a neat middle ground between the Baneslayer and Moldrifter situation, because the turn it comes down, it can affect the board, because whatever you are able to attack with from before will have a cool bonus from you playing it. And then after that, whenever you can attack with it, then it becomes the Baneslayer. Boonbringer Valkyrie has that kind of...
without giving flying.
Yeah, that double effect. Without being busted.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. And I think if you're in a cube where you don't want Boonbringer Valkyrie, but you want it to give something, this is a pretty cool choice.
And then I think Caldera Hellion is really neat. I like when creature wraths give you something to do with your creatures that are going to die in the creature wrath.
This card also broke my brain because the custom version of it was in my deck. But that probably doesn't make for good video content, so I will stop mentioning those. I like this card.
I knew it was inevitable.
I think red wraths are a really interesting design space too. I think probably underutilized by the average cube curator, because you tend to think of wraths as being very centered in black and white. But I think red wraths add some really cool texture, and it's interesting in this case that it does 3, so you need to sacrifice something else, but you probably had something else you want to sacrifice. It's a cool card.
Yep. Rock's Warmonk, I say, is cool for cubes, knowing that around this time, it's probably a cube staple. But by the time that you're playing, I don't think it's getting played in cubes at all.
Yeah, you can miss me with the 3/4 lifelink for 3. But I believe you that at one time this was a staple.
Yeah, this card gets played in Legacy as soon as it gets printed.
Because it pitches to Force of Will?
No, it's just something cool to do in in kind of a fair hate bears type deck. Like it's your beater finisher that aggro can't outlast, like can't get under, because it's gaining 3 life every turn they don't kill it, and you can't bolt it, and control it can get under and get through sufficiently as long as you're playing against them as well with your blue.
Okay, I can see it.
And then Stoic Angel, I've always thought Stoic Angel is just such a cool design because of the way it breaks symmetry a little bit in an otherwise symmetrical taxing effect.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, I keep saying this, but the art direction is just fantastic.
Alara art is just next level. 2008.
Elspeth is from Alara. Debuts in Alara.
Elspeth debuts in Alara, correct. Elspeth is from a plane that fell to Phyrexia, and then planeswalked to Bant and was raised on Bant.
She's from Capenna, right?
Oh, that's right. Yes, she's from Capenna, which fell to Phyrexia and then Angels took back over or something?
I think it fell to Phyrexia except for the one city where instead they decided to emulate 1920s America, but with devils in charge. Something like that. But this has a very Elspeth vibe to it, which is
Yes.
why I asked if that was the case.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure Volcan Baga, I think this artist did the original Elspeth.
We'll see that soon, I suppose. But yeah, this is a sweet card.
I was right. Yeah, Volcan Baga does
Like
both.
in all the ways I don't think Rock's Warmonk is cool, for one additional mana, this manages to be way cooler.
Because it ends the game and Rock's Warmonk prolongs the game.
I think that's true, but it also just, instead of being like an overstated creature with lifelink, it does something really unique.
Yeah, that's a totally fair criticism of Rock's Warmonk and praise for
And
Stoic Angel.
Stoic Angel doesn't have like weird pizza biscuits flying around it.
People call those pancakes. They called him Happy Pancake Flipper in Standard.
Okay.
Pizza biscuits. Those are sigils, I'll have you know.
Okay.
Okay, Cube Stables. Hey, look, it's Elspeth Knight Errant by Volcan Baga. No surprise that two of the Planeswalkers from the set are here under Cube Staples, two that lasted a long time in Cube lists. I think Elspeth probably started getting cut from cubes whenever the Gideon that can make an emblem from BFZ comes out.
Ally of Zendikar.
Yeah, Ally of Zendikar comes out, and then she's certainly getting cut from cubes whenever we're getting cards like the Wandering Emperor coming out.
I honestly think a lot of cubes could still play this just very happily. Like if I stuck this in Bodleian Cube right now, it would be a very playable card.
+3/+3 and flying is wildly powerful if you have any decent creature out.
As a plus. Again, plus this is an unbeatable kitchen table planeswalker because you can only work towards the ult.
That's true.
Yeah. And to be fair, the ult here is pretty heinous. But I think this card managed to have a really interesting decision space in spite of the fact that it's 2+1s. Plus, there's like a half dozen knockoff Elspeths that are also trying to do this, but I don't think like any of them hit it quite as hard as this one does. And you're right, +3/+3 and flying is kind of nuts. Creatures were a lot suckier.
Well, I mean, when you were hitting Rock's Warmonk, yeah, that was crazy. That was wild. But it wasn't Ragavan.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't Ragavan. It wasn't Felia. It wasn't Death Creature Champion.
Yeah, she has maybe aged well just because the creatures have gotten so good. But the problem is that so many of the 2 white planeswalkers have also gotten extremely good.
Yeah, I think you're right. But actually, not to have this devolve into some kind of, rate comparison, but I could be convinced that I might rather have this in my deck than Gideon.
Yeah, okay, wow. Fair.
I think the token is obviously, quote unquote, it's worse, right? It's a 1 versus a 2 on all the stats. But I think your point about the flying is pretty huge. And like, if you just have any other board presence, 5 loyalty is so much to try to chew through, especially when like if you don't kill it all the way, they're just gonna hit you again with like a flying Adeline or something like that. Like it's just
yeah.
I think I don't usually put cards in the Bodleian maybe board, but from this presentation, but maybe we're gonna give it a try. I think the card's just really cool. I love the art, I like the decision space, but I agree. Absolute cube staple and no Wandering Emperor, but very, very cool.
Also love Ajani Vengeant. If you aren't aware, in the timeline, this Ajani is prior to the Lorwyn Ajani.
Yeah, this is after his brother Jazal gets killed.
That's right.
And then he wants to take revenge.
Yep. And then that's why Ajani Goldmane has the double-headed axe, because it's his brother's axe and his axe fused into one weapon. And this is Ajani with just his half.
That's pretty cool. Who does he have to kill that killed his brother? I guess have to is the wrong word.
I think an agent of Nicol Bolas killed his brother, if I'm not mistaken.
Gotcha. Oh, that's very fascinating. I didn't know that part. And this is certainly cooler than the other Boros Ajani. And it's a classic card. Excited to see this anytime.
I love this design. Real quick, lore. Jazal's murderer was manipulated into killing Jazal by Marisi, who is a Leonin. The Claws of Marisi, the Nakatl, the Leonin, the cat people on Naya. Marisi is like the leader.
So not Bolas.
Jazal's death was an inside job.
Absolutely. And yeah, Lightning Helix on -2. Great.
The various ways that target permanent not untapping can like really be potent is impressive, because for a long time I thought that plus was kind of meh, and I was like, oh, it doesn't even like freeze a land or anything. It doesn't untap, but it actually it can be so flexible and cool and feel very strong to be facing down.
Yeah, it's one of those effects that just makes a player feel smart as they're piloting it. And
Yeah.
I think that's what Cube is about, right? Like, Cube is fundamentally, you want your players to be like, wow, this line I took is incredible, and I feel so smart for having done it. And I think that's just such a fantastic effect to make people feel that way.
Lightning.
A truly classic card.
Keep in mind that this is the Planeswalker redirection rule, and that Planeswalkers aren't legendary at this time, just Planeswalker dash Ajani. So the Oracle text of Lightning is a lot less attractive than what Lightning says right there on the card.
Wait, so you could have multiple Ajanis?
No. You had, before the legend rule, you had the Planeswalker
uniqueness
rule. Yep.
Bingo. Right. Yeah. Oh, wait, so Lightning, you used to be able to hit Planeswalkers too?
It still can. Blightning, you're going to hate this, has never been printed with this text, but Blightning says, Blightning deals 3 damage to target player or Planeswalker. That player or that Planeswalker's controller discards 2 cards.
Really?
Yes. No version of printed Blightning says Planeswalker on it. And yet, every Blightning can hit Planeswalkers.
So that's super fascinating. I also played this card in Loam Cube and didn't know that, and it maybe would have changed one of my decisions when casting it randomly off of Jund 'Em Out.
This is the Dominaria rules change that you hate so much.
I do despise the Dominaria Burn Errata, but I hadn't considered that it would affect this case. But I don't know why I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, I honestly think they should never print it again. They should just have all the existing versions, which are all wrong, be the only versions of Lightning that exist.
I mean, this is a pretty bad 4-player card, so I don't know why they'd reprint it again.
Fair. Okay, the legend, the myth, Cruel Ultimatum, the dream.
Yeah, what an amazing card. I'm excited to cube any cube where Cruel Ultimatum is something I can do. Whether that's, we're hard casting it, or we're Mystics Mastering it, even if we're Dream Halsing it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good place for it. Just keep in mind that you cannot Gear Hulk it, because it's a sorcery.
Yeah. Someday I think we'll get a Gear Hulk that can hit sorceries.
A Mystics Mastery Gear Hulk?
I'm sure cards like Cruel Ultimatum are the reason that it can't.
Yeah, because you could do this in your opponent's draw step.
Yeah, maybe that Gear Hulk needs to be not have flash if it can hit sorceries.
You think?
That's probably the right draw step Cruel Ultimatum you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. My personal favorites. I think Viscera Dragger is such a cool design. I love that you can cycle it and unearth it for the exact cost that is its mana cost, and then it becomes basically a different spell. A 3/3 haste that you exile at the end step, but that you draw, which is basically Blitz, by the way, Proto Blitz. But it's separate cards, just like Icarus Lick that we talked about last year. Cycling is its own thing, unearth is its own thing. If you mill it or discard it anyway, you can unearth it. If you need it as a body, it is a 3/3 for 4. That's a Hill Giant stat line. Just very cool, clean design, and it's got 3 creature types. Love to see
frankly, I think this card is insanely cool. Yeah. Which is funny because Icarus Lick is not my favorite card.
What's the deal? It's just Icarus Lick, but a guy.
I have no logical defense. This just feels more charming to me.
All right. Branching Bolt, my hate for flyers is well established. And so bolting a creature without flying and a creature with flying on the same spell, pretty sick.
Yes.
Wild Nacatl, Willy Thoktar. I played Naya Zoo in Modern for a long time. Whenever I had to play Modern, I would play Goblins, I would play 8-Whack. My best PTQ ever, I was playing a deck called Keldwhack, which was Flame of Keld, but 8-Whack. All my best runs at F&M were just Naya Zoo, Bushwhacker Zoo, Bloodbraid Elf.
Willy Thoktar see play in Naya Zoo in Modern?
Yeah, sure did.
Cool.
Survives Lightning Bolt.
It does survive Lightning Bolt.
Drops off when Fatal Push comes out. But before then, it was hard to answer, buddy.
Yeah, the slide when Fatal Push comes out and you're just like, here are all the cards that were no longer playable because of this card.
Yeah, this is a shame. But honestly, Black needed the help. Like Museum of Modern without Fatal Push, Black removal is embarrassing. You got to Thoughtseize it. You got to Thoughtseize it out of their hand, and if they draw it, too bad. What a shame. Hope that you can make them sack it Wieldon of the Veil, otherwise it's going to hit you. And then Wild Nacatl. Just love a 3/3 for 1. Fun fact about Wild Nacatl, when this was really popular in Modern, and in fact at one point gets banned in Modern, the German version of this card is Wildernacotl. There was a joke that you would play, your opponent plays Wildernacotl in English, and you play the better one, Wildernacotl.
I like that. But Wild Nicodle, part of the Claws of Marisi. So
It's true.
that's no good.
They killed
This is an evil
Jazal.
creature.
Evil creature. They killed Jazal. Fun facts. Imperial Archangel used to be one of the best reanimator threats that you could get. You slam out a 5/8 Shroud that the damage that they would take is absorbed by this 5/8 instead.
The third lightning bolt gets it, I guess.
Yep. Pretty nuts. Pretty hard to deal with.
Shroud is still better than Hexproof, but
I agree. I just realized this is the second time in Shards that I'm putting two Bant cards side by side. I really liked Bant, y'all. You know Cruel Ultimatum. Do you know what the other three ultimatums that I have not shown you do? The Naya Ultimatum, for example, Titanic.
So it's just Titanic. Jund is Ruinous Ultimatum.
No, that's the Mardu one from Ikoria.
The Jund one, I'm pretty sure, is like target player sacrifices like 3 permanents or something like
that. It is 3 Vindicates, and it's a violent ultimatum.
Okay, yeah, violent ultimatum. Okay, and so that leaves.
So Titanic
Naya?
Ultimatum. Yeah, Naya's Titanic Ultimatum.
Okay, so we have Naya, we have Bant,
and then Esper.
So we have Esper.
Do you know what Titanic does?
Does it double the power and toughness of 5 creatures?
It gives your entire team +5/+5 first strike, trample, and lifelink this turn. It's mega overrun.
Yeah. Okay.
The Esper one is Brilliant Ultimatum. You exile your top 5 cards, an opponent separates them into 2 piles, and you can cast for free one of the piles.
Wow.
Whatever's in the piles. Yeah. And here's Clarion Ultimatum. Absolute garbage.
Yeah. It does seem like this. The average is what, like 3 lands and like 2 creatures?
I mean, 2 creatures is pretty optimistic. I think you're getting 1 creature and 4 lands, or 5 lands, 99% of the time that this spell is cast.
Yeah, I'm like trying to envision like what the best hits in the land space is. I'm like, I guess this gets you a second Field of the Dead.
I don't know, man. This is just embarrassing.
You've already got Field of the Dead out. Yeah, and I mean, no, I'm with you. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, yeah, I guess like you have Field of the Dead out and 7 mana, and your reward is another 1.
I love that you're thinking of things that will actually generate value by getting basic lands, because it's hard, and that's mostly what this thing does. Hey, you made it to 7 mana. Your reward is 5 more mana.
Yeah, that's pretty brutal. And these just feel like cards that should be splashy, right? 7 all mana, all pips is, in fact, it's one of those cards where I'd love to know if there's like an emergency nerf. Like, it's so bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't read like an emergency nerf, right? There's some cards you read and you're like, oh, this line got added because like something terrible happened.
Mm-hmm. We had Tooth and Nail at this point.
Yeah, because obviously if this said name 5 permanents, it would be crazy.
Like, this is harder to cast than Tooth and Nail. At least let me go get 2 permanents and put them into play, even with different names. I don't know. You can do whatever rider you want. Total mana value is less than 10 or something. I just think it's so funny that we have Cruel Ultimatum in this cycle. The rest are all powerful, if not nearly as good as Cruel. And then this one is just a joke.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Okay, Realm Razor. Do you know this card?
Nope.
Check it.
Oh, it's World Crusher Dragon for just lands.
Yep, but it's the opponent's lands too.
Oh.
If you sack it with its trigger on the stack, it's Armageddon.
O-ring text. Yep, that's pretty cool.
So, for a little while, there's a card called Seance in Dark Ascension. Do you know this card?
I've definitely read it before. I don't.
So it's an enchantment. At your upkeep, you can exile a creature card from your graveyard, and you make a token copy of it that's a spirit. And you have to exile that card at the beginning of the next end step. But the thing is, it triggers each upkeep, not just yours. Every upkeep it triggers. So I think that there was like a brief window where you might want to play Realm Razor because it's in your graveyard. You Faithless Looting or something, put it away. And then in your opponent's upkeep, you make a token copy of Realm Razor so they don't have any lands for their turn. But then the token goes away at the end step, and you can have lands during your turn. So any turn that there's a Realm Razor in your graveyard that you can exile, you can just time walk the opponent.
That's crazy.
You just take all the lands off the board. And if you have like a Viscera Seer or something, you can just Armageddon on demand.
Yeah.
Anyway, this card's just wild, and it does see some standard play for a little while. And then one of these 2 cards, Immortal Coil or Lich's Mirror, I recall opening in foil. One of them, I don't know, doesn't matter. I opened it in foil, and I played it in the shop that I was going to in Norman. I don't know which one it was, but the fact that I opened it in foil and played it leads me to believe that this is around the time that I drafted for the first time. Neither of these cards are
Okay.
particularly good in draft, but I just think it's a note that this is around the time that I drafted for the very first time and played non-sealed limited Magic.
I feel like Mortal Coil has some untapped value as a cube image.
I agree. It's a pretty cool cube.
It is.
Okay, so now we're going to wrap up. I'm going to tell you about some decks that were in the meta. First up, Quick and Toast.
Why is the picture leyline binding?
So the way MTG Top 8 works is that decks have certain archetypes, and the archetype of Quick and Toast is 5-color control.
Okay.
And they use the modern image of, whatever most recent deck was in the archetype that was successful. So Kithkins is mono white aggro. RB Sauce down there is a black-red aggro deck, so it's got that lizard. I have no idea why Fairies has an image from, like, Alpha. Blue-black control, I guess, probably did well in an old school tournament, and that's some draw a card artifact from old school.
Okay. That totally makes sense. So some like legacy 5-color beans deck
Yeah, exactly.
is giving us the art for Quick and Toast. Okay, that's a great explanation.
So Quick and Toast here gets second at Worlds 2008 by Jamie Park, but it was pioneered by Guillaume Wafutapa and Olivier Ruel, who are other professional players. I think Olivier is actually the creator of the deck. It is 5-color control, and it uses all kinds of different cards over the years. It has tons of different permutations. But what I want you to note is that this same deck is hoping to cast Cruel Ultimatum, Cryptic Command, Rock's War Monk, Una, who costs blue or black, blue or black, blue or black, and Cloud Thresher. Do you know what Cloud Thresher is?
Cloud Thresher is a green 6-drop, right?
That's correct. It costs 2 green, 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 and it has Evoke for 2 green, green, Flash and Reach. When it enters, it deals 2 damage to each creature with flying and each player. There's 2 of these in the main board because Fairies is the menace of 2008. As soon as Bitter Blossom releases, Fairies takes over everything for a long time. As you can see, at Worlds, where Fairies got 1st and 5th through 8th.
Yeah, I did see this and think, wow, that's pretty crazy that Fairies was doing that well. I knew it was a prominent deck, but I didn't know it was that.
Fairies is the menace of this time. So anyway, I just think it's neat that you're casting both GG Cloud Thresher and Cruel Ultimatum, all Grixis pips. And the way that you're doing that in 5-color control is Reflecting Pool, which I have highlighted in yellow. Reflecting Pool, whenever you have Vivid lands out, is just the perfect land that taps for mana of any color. Because your Vivid lands, whether they have counters or not, could produce mana of any color. And then you've got Firelit Thicket, Mystic Gate, and Flooded Grove, and Sunken Ruins, which are the filter lands from Shadowmoor. This all adds up to you having pretty much perfect mana over the course of every game.
Free 5-color mana. You're also casting Wrath of God,
yeah.
which
and Power
is
Cloud.
2 white pips on top of... Oh, right, but you have a 4 green pip card.
Oh.
There's just no white pips in any of the other cards.
Got you. Yeah, I see what you mean now. Yep.
That you mentioned.
Yep. And Rock's War Monk, which is 3 different pips. So you just don't care about color at all. Everything is mana value to you.
Normally not super into 5-color, but this is pretty cool.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, this deck is called Quick and Toast. I looked at all the interviews I could. I cannot ever figure out where the name comes from.
Sound off in the comments.
If you ever hear Quick and Toast, it's talking about 5-color control. And it's something that Olivier is famous for enjoying and plays for years and years with different versions of. Next up, Pro Tour Elf Ball. Pro Tour Berlin 2008 has an Elves deck in the top 6 slots. And here's why. Do you know about Glimpse of Nature Elves?
I know what Glimpse of Nature does. Oh, we got Heritage Druid. Love that card. Okay. I see how this is going. We're tapping our Nettle Sentinels for green to play more elves.
Yep, which draw you cards.
And then we're drawing cards. And then when we cast those, we're untapping them. And then so eventually we make 1 metric ton of mana, which it looks like we then devour all of our elves into a huge predator dragon, or we cast Mirror Entity and we use it to make all of our creatures
arbitrarily large,
infinite.
Or if you are Luis Scott Vargas, you win Pro Tour Berlin by casting Grape Shot.
Oh, and this is LSV's first Pro Tour that he won.
I don't know if it's his first. but he did win.
Cool. Notably, the only grape shot elves in all the
Yep.
dragon elves
2,
and
3,
elvish
4, and
entities.
5 all go on Predator Dragon. He goes on Grape Shot, and then 6th place goes with Mirror Entity. Fairies bringing up the rear there. Again, just keeping the fairy menace alive in other formats, not just standard.
So is grape shot a thing like his team showed up with, or is that like an innovation?
I don't know.
Because that's like pretty smart, right? Like, because if people are showing up thinking you're like Predator Dragon and Mirror Entity are the cards to beat in this deck, right? Like you just need a removal spell for those cards. But like Grape Shot just kills you. It doesn't. Your removal spell doesn't work.
That's
So that's a
true.
cool little juke in a format where you're expecting like Go for the Throat to be the way you don't lose.
I will note that another deck I'm going to talk about has Stifles in the main board because Storm is so popular at this time. So that is something to be concerned about, is that this could be a soft win condition if they have a Stifle.
That's true, but Stifle also stops Predator Dragon and Mirror Entity.
Not Predator Dragon. It's a replacement effect. It does stop Mirror Entity. You're right. But they could probably activate Mirror Entity twice. Anyway, there's a reason Glimpse of Nature gets banned as soon as Modern is founded as a format. This is why.
Valid.
Okay. Pro Tour Kuala Lumpur 2008, John Finkel's winning deck. They drafted Lauren Morningtide, and this is the deck that John Finkel, believed by some to be the greatest Magic player who ever lived, is what he won with. He has 1 rare, Preeminent Captain.
Which we talked about last time. It is very cool. Man, not knowing what any of these cards does, except for a Mole Drifter and Festermite, it definitely makes it hard to grasp. This is just Kithkin aggro, right?
This is just Kithkin aggro. You've got the Harbinger there in the center with the red hair. She's a wizard, and she can go get the Wizened Sen at the bottom left. She's a cleric. All the rest are soldiers, except for Mole Drifter, of course, and Pestermite. But all the Kithkin are soldiers. And so Preeminent Captain can put any of these things into play, tapped and attacking.
That's pretty cool.
And Zephyrnaut, who is in the dead center with Kinship, at the beginning of your upkeep, if your top card is a Kithkin or a soldier, you can flip that card, reveal it, and make it a Sarah Angel. 3 mana, 4/4 Flying Vigilance.
4/4 Flying Vigilance, yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got Mole Drifter, you've got Disperse. You have 3 removal spells, Coordinated Barrage, Weight of Conscience, and sometimes Disperse. And then you've got the Harassment of Pestermite. But like other than that, no hard removal. Distant Melody probably drew him a ton of cards.
Yeah, Mole Drifter being a common is still wild to me.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I thought you would enjoy looking at a Pro Tour winning deck that has 16 basic lands.
I think this is a really cool deck.
Yep, Joe would be proud.
Definitely.
Okay, and finally, as promised, the Stifle deck. Do you know about Dreadstill?
So I'm not looking at the screen, but that sounds like we're playing Dreadnought and Standstill.
Correct. All right, I was mistaken earlier about Stifle being played in Extended. It's actually really be played in Legacy because Storm
Are we
is
just
popular.
countering the Standstill trigger?
No, that doesn't work because it triggers again when you cast.
Oh, yeah. No, that checks out. So obviously we've got a Stifle Nutshell here. We've got a Counterbalance Sensei's Divining Top Misery Loop.
Uh-huh. Trinket Mage can go get Dreadnought or Divining Top or Engineered Explosives.
Yep.
The thing that Standstill's doing here, and I watched Paul Cheon explain this in a video, you just turn to Mishra's Factory Standstill. If they don't break the Standstill, you will kill them with Mishra's Factory. They have to cast a spell or they will lose. Or they could Wasteland. But generally speaking, they need to cast a spell to break out of Standstill, which is 3 cards for you.
Wow. So this is like Mishra's Factory tempo.
Mm-hmm.
That just is also playing a Dreadnought page.
Also, in that same interview, the fetch lands are obviously an important part of the meta. But there are only 5. They're all from Onslaught. This is so old that they were still called the sack lands. BDM asks him, do you ever use the Stifle on the opponent's sack lands? And Cheon says, sometimes. And sometimes it's worth it, but usually not.
Huh. Magic was just a different game.
Sure was.
Counterbalance Top Control is horrendous.
So what I thought was cool about this deck is that you can play most of Dreadstill in Legacy today, including with Urza's Saga. You can Saga out the Dreadnought. But the modern versions of this are not playing Stifle or Trickbind. They're playing the fairy that stops ETBs.
Hushbringer?
Yeah, Hushbringer, or the thing that counters ETBs when they go on the stack. One of those things, or they're playing Dress Down. And then whenever your Urza Saga trigger resolves, you get the Dreadnought for free.
The MKM card too, right? The Doorkeeper Thrall.
Doorkeeper's Roll. Yeah, that's right. But one of the cards in this list is banned. Which card is banned?
Wait, is Top Band in Legacy?
Is that your guess?
Well, I'm looking through. It's not Stifle, because that's still there. It's not Dreadnought. It's not Brainstorm. It's not Standstill. It's not Force of Will. It's not Daze. It's not Engineered Explosives. I don't think it's Trinket Mage. It's definitely not Wasteland or any of those. Top is my answer.
Yep, it's Top. Miracles is the reason that Top is banned. But it's because Miracles was playing Counterbalance.
Yeah, I mean, this combo is insane. Like, it's such a miserable thing to do to someone.
Top is legal in Commander and Vintage, and I think you shouldn't put it in your cube. Hot take.
I don't think that's a hot take. I think don't put it in your cube. I think you'll get less hate for saying that than I did for saying I don't like the Githkin figure of Destiny.
Yeah, that's maybe fair.
It probably is miserable in Commander too.
Oh,
But-
yeah, of course.
Top for Miracles makes sense. I was like, I don't think in Legacy they were banned stuff just because they're like, this card is heinously unfun. That's a wild deck. And
Yep.
I think Dreadnought is really cool. Like, Dreadnought's the opposite of Top Counterbalance. Dreadnought is busted, but eminently cool. Counterbalance and Top is busted, and you suck if you do that.
No swag.
Yeah, no swag. Sorry to the two cubers that I really like, that I won't name right now, who have Top Counterbalance in their cubes.
Nobody's perfect.
You don't suck, but I would like you better if you didn't have that.
Even more than he does.
Yeah, exactly. You know who you are.
Okay, that's it for 2008. We made it. 3 years in.
We did 3 years in, and I think every single one of these, we talked for a longer time.
I'm going to have to edit so much. But that's okay, because it's fun. 2008, banger year, great art, some great sets, and the release of my favorite video game. What could go wrong?
That's a good question. In Magic, nothing. This has been a lot of fun, Bones. Thanks so much for putting this together, and I will see you in 2009.
Of course. All right. Bye.